Yeah, that's right.
We're all distracted.
Remember?
He's got his watch and he's got his thing. He'll take his tie off next. The shoes will come off after that.
I should eat. Yeah, really? Yeah. Yeah, really? Yeah, okay. Come on. How are you? Good days. Well, I think you'll dominate. Well and truly. No. You can name back to, you know what she's got to you for? She's the go to the unless there's something wrong, you go to the next week. Well, there is that. Honestly, that's one of your biggest things, as well as how hard you work as well. That's exactly what it is. And your work is what you got. Nothing else can for me. Apart from the handsome looks and just the genuine wittiness, not weirdness. But we'll run with that too.
Honourable members, the Deputy Speaker.
Are there any constituency statements by honourable members? I call the member for Kennedy.
Did you say Kennedy?
That's
yeah,
right.
The Maldives rodeo is in very serious trouble, and I have absolutely no idea how it ended up being run by a public servant in Brisbane and a lady in Townsville. They tell me they're quite nice ladies, so I don't denigrate them, but how anyone could run a rodeo when you sort of never really been on a horse much and you live in Brisbane and one lives in Townsville, it's not really surprising. Now, Curry's Mary Muster is still going very strong in the neighbouring town of Cloncurry. It was the first rodeo in the area and the second biggest rodeo in Queensland for a long time. It was founded by my father, and he was president of the ARRA, the Australian Rough Riders Association. He wasn't a rough rider himself, but he was very, very active in rodeoing. And as a little kid, I had to run the water over because they built all of the chutes and grounds themselves. Now, that was the spirit of rodeo. We had 12 or 15 blokes building, carrying all the big logs, you know, cobbing them together and building the rodeo grounds. And I had to run the water over from our house, which was about 400 metres away, to all the workers. The spirit of rodeo. My father's song, Curry's Mary Muster, Pride of the Great Northwest. Owners and managers are in the show together with their boys to make it grow. One big family to strike a blow. That's the way we do it at Curry Rodeo. Now, that's the spirit of rodeo. I worked, because I wanted to watch the fights, and the bar had steel protection, so I was protected. And a big mob came down from Dormitory and they'd get into fights, and Vern Daisy, very, very famous rugby league player, he'd be there enjoying it or either getting in himself. Anyway, but it was a great atmosphere, big trees, shade. I'd talk to all my mates. Kenny Coleman, you know, I'd see every year, greatest rough rider in Australian history. Grant Lillyman, one of the most prominent families the Midwest has ever produced. Ronnie Peirce, my best mate. We had 500,000 acres together, the pair of us. I'd run into all these people, I'd see them. And it was a shady area. It was very well set out. Now we just have a barren brick wall and nothing. Not a tree, not the ounce of shade, no shade cover. No one can drink at the bar and talk about old times. No one wants to because of the incredible heat, barrenness. And if you had anything to do with the town, you would know that. You would know that you needed to put trees and maybe a shade shed there. You would know that. My son, Robbie Catter, State Member of Parliament, he lives in Mount Isa. My family lived in Mount Isa, Cloncurry area for about 130 years now.
Your time has expired, Mr. Kennedy. Sorry. Member for Kennedy, and I call the member for Bean.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. Menslink has been supporting young men in the Canberra region for over 20 years through free counselling, volunteer mentoring and education programs. In that time, it's helped thousands of young men get through tough or lonely times. It helps young men reach their full potential and become the great adult men they want to be, because Menslink believes everything is possible for them, their families, their mates and our community. Services are provided at no cost and are available to all young men aged 10 to 25 in Canberra and the surrounding region. Menslink's sister organisation, Fearless Women, was set up recently to provide equivalent services to young women. Deputy Speaker, I'm pleased to update the Chamber on a fantastic activity which I was able to participate in last week in support of Menslink and its goals. The Menslink Great Walk, which now is in its 4th year, was a huge success, not only raising funds for this fantastic organisation, but also raising its profile and the availability of its services through the Canberra region. Journeying across our nation's capital, the 5-day adventure is one of those unforgettable epic adventures. At 142 kilometres, this trail is longer than the Kokoda track and further than the distance to Everest Base Camp, and gave all the participants, including me, a fresh perspective on our hometown of Canberra. Starting at Parliament House on the morning of Tuesday, the 12th of November 2024, we walked up to 30 kilometres per day along the Canberra Centenary Trail. The challenge on the walk is not just the distance. Walkers raise significant funds for the cause as well. And those contributions will go directly to Menslink to support its programs that support young men and their families in the Canberra community through our volunteer mentoring, counselling, school and workplace programs. Each year it costs over $1,800 to support one young man through counselling, mentoring and school programs. Every dollar raised is an important part of funding that effort. The programs help improve mental fitness, combat domestic violence, reduce youth suicide, increase respect and positive behaviours, and help create stronger communities. Deputy Speaker, I'd like to thank Menslink Chair Michael Badnelli, the Board, CEO Ben Gathercole and all the crew at Menslink for the work they do and each and every day, and all their efforts for this year's Great Walk event. I'd also like to acknowledge the contribution of all the walkers and their supporters, and a shout out to the sponsors as well. Three Sides Marketing, Southside Physio, PSC Insurance Brokers, Geocon, Working Gear and Region Media. And also thank you to all the other contributors for your support of the walkers, and through them, the families and young men that Menslink helps every day.
I call the member for Fisher.
Thanks, Madam Deputy Speaker. Just a week ago, the Sunshine Coast community came together to celebrate the 2024 Sunshine Coast Business Awards. This year, 37 awards were distributed, recognising the immense talent, innovation and determination of local business owners and entrepreneurs from the electorates of Wide Bay, Fairfax and Fisher. And I'm proud to say that Fisher took home nearly 50% of the awards. Large Accommodation Provider of the Year went to Mercure, Sunshine Coast, Koana Waters. Large Advanced Technology Group of the Year and previous Fisher Innovator of the Year went to Grease Boss in Warana. Large Business Service of the Year, Digital Nomads HQ in Mooloolaba. Small Builder of the Year went to Nyblad Construction in Caloundra West. Large Tourism Experience of the Year went to Amaze World in Palmview. Small Tourism Experience of the Year went to Saltwater Eco Tours in Mooloolaba. Large Hospitality Business of the Year went to My Surf Club, the Alex Surf Club. Well done, guys. Small Manufacturer and 2024 Fisher Awards finalist went to First Light Fabrication from Bedina. Small Professional Service went to Animal Emergency Service in Tanawa, who do such a fantastic job. Large training provider and 2024 Fisher Award finalist went to Neurodivergent Empowered, and they also do terrific work. Small training provider went to the veteran-run 8 Mile Consulting in Caloundra. Well done, guys. Large food and agribusiness went to Mullaney Dairies. Well done to the Hoppers. Small food and agribusiness went to Green Valley Finger Limes in Peachester. Large health and wellness service went to Sunshine Coast Orthopaedic Group in Batunia. And large retailer of the year went to Kiwana Flooring, based in Warana. I was also glad to see 3 Fisher success stories inducted into the Sunshine Coast Business Awards Hall of Fame, including game-changing anti-bullying platform Stymie, globally renowned romantic getaway spot Narrows Escape Rainforest Retreat, well done to them, and Sunny Coast icons and shop local champions White's IGA, run by Roz and Michael White. Well done, Roz and Michael. On behalf of the people of Fisher, I want to say congratulations to all of those businesses who consistently represent the best of the best on the Sunshine Coast. I'm proud to be the member for Fisher, which is said to be the small business capital of the country, and I want to thank them all for their work and congratulate all of the award winners.
Call the member for Gilmore.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, home to HMAS Albatross, the Fleet Air Arm and HMAS Creswell, defence and defence industry is pivotal in my electorate of Gilmore. Last week, I hosted Richard Marles, the Acting Prime Minister and Minister for Defence, providing a huge opportunity for him to understand the scale of operations in our region and to see for himself the skill and dedication of our defence members on the south coast of New South Wales. With more than 7,500 serving defence members, veterans and their families in my electorate, defence is highly important to people here. I would like to particularly thank the early educators at One Tree Defence Childcare Tingara who we visited. They do magnificent work supporting our young ones for our defence families. We made a visit to the MCCI Italian Seniors Group in Nowra, a valuable networking group that comes together over traditional Italian food, friendship, activities, and we were even treated to Stella's opera singing. We met with electrical and carpentry students at TAFE to see how our fee-free TAFE is making a difference, and it is. It is great to see these classes booming, and now we are making fee-free TAFE permanent because we need more tradies to build more homes. The Acting Prime Minister also confirmed that while the previous chopper on a stick could not be revived, there would be a new replacement helicopter because we know how important it is to show at our gateway to Nowra that we are a proud Navy and Defence town. Members of Special Operation Command's Australian Defence Force Parachuting School gave us a super display of different ADF parachuting techniques, showing how important ADF parachuting is for defence capability for our nation. We visited the fine defence members and staff at HMAS Albatross, including 723 Squadron, which does initial helicopter training for both Navy and Army. We met with avionics maintainers that maintain the MH-60R Seahawk Romeo helicopters. We went to the Romeo squadrons and even hopped in a Seahawk Romeo simulator to witness firsthand the fine training our pilots and crews undertake to be prepared for any situation. Deputy Speaker, HMAS Albatross is growing. It is currently receiving a $125 million airport and infrastructure upgrade, and soon there will be a further $140 million in infrastructure works to support new and additional Seahawk Romeo helicopters. This will include a new squadron, simulator and associated infrastructure. Thank you to everyone involved with this visit. The Minister took his time to talk with Defence members, and Defence members asked great questions. You could see the learning taking place. I certainly look forward to a bright future for HMAS Albatross, and if you're a local or from anywhere around Australia, consider a career in the Defence Force today.
Call the member for Dawson.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. If you're lucky in life, you will get old, grey and good-looking, a bit like me. I was scheduled to speak on the aged care bill before it was guillotined. However, I wanted to ensure my constituents of Dawson know that ageing gracefully and with dignity is important to me. When you have worked hard your entire life, it is only fair that the government provide assistance in your golden years. We need to ensure that any legislation promotes dignity and independence, values elders in our society, and is strong and sustainable for the future generations. In good faith, the Coalition worked to ensure that the government's reforms suited regional and rural Australia, not just those in the big cities. The Coalition pushed the Labor government to include grandfathering arrangements, lifetime caps, a much lower taper rate, and an assurance that the federal government will remain the priority funder of aged care and not the consumer. The introduction of grandfathering arrangements into this legislation is most critical. This guarantees Australians who are already in residential aged care or on a home care package or are waiting for allocated home care package will not see any changes to their existing arrangements. This means any aged care Australian who is currently in the aged care system will not pay 1 cent more. Another vital component was a lifetime cap. This means that the maximum contribution payable is fixed, providing families with peace of mind. Deputy Speaker, I'm proud to come from a rural and regional area, but unfortunately this also comes with its issues. That is why the Coalition negotiated with the government to secure an additional investment of $300 million in capital funding for regional, rural and remote aged care providers. Deputy Speaker, while this has been a significant achievement made by the Coalition on this bill, it is important to remember that this is Labor's package reforms. This bill was not co-designed along with the Coalition. This Labor government has failed to address critical issues such as workforce, regulatory impacts and implementation timelines in this bill. Last year alone, 49 aged care homes closed under the Albanese Labor government. This bill cannot force the closure of more homes. We want Australians to live their life with dignity. The Coalition has, and always will, fight for elderly Australians who live in rural and regional areas.
Call the member for Hawke.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Patricia Mary Dorothy Clegg, affectionately known to us all as Pat, was a remarkable woman whose presence will be deeply missed. Born on the 13th of August 1933, Pat passed away peacefully on the 16th of August 2024. Pat and her beloved husband Arthur raised 3 wonderful children in our community, Christine, Malcolm and Elizabeth, and she was a devoted grandmother to her 8 grandchildren. Pat cherished her family deeply and they adored her in return. She instilled in them her courage of conviction, always encouraging them to stand strong in their beliefs. A matriarch of the Bacchus Marsh branch of the Australian Labor Party, Pat was a formidable force, a strong woman who was unwavering in her belief in a just and fair society. She was well versed in the issues of the day and always ready to discuss, or perhaps even vigorously debate, her views with anyone who thought differently. Pat was passionate about the things she loved. First and foremost, her family. And then, in no particular order, clothes, her beloved Richmond Tigers, and politics. She and Arthur were generous and gracious hosts. Their door was always open, the kettle always on for a cuppa and a chat. There was no judgment from Pat, just an occasional knowing nod and perhaps a cheeky smile. Pat was a true believer, and her legacy lives on in her children and all those who are fortunate enough to know her. It was my great privilege to attend her service, a final farewell to a woman who has left a lasting impression on our community and all who had the honour of calling her a friend. My condolences to Chris and all of the family. Vale Pat Clegg. Deputy Speaker, Parhammer Windows and Doors is a shining example of the innovation and talent in my electorate of Hawke. This remarkable family business has grown from humble beginnings in Balan to setting the gold standard in energy-efficient products across the nation. Since 1990, Edith and Tony Parhammer have worked tirelessly to deliver sustainable, high-quality products to clients across Australia. Their dedication and craftsmanship have made them industry leaders. Recently, Parhammer windows and doors were recognised with 4 prestigious awards, 2 national, 1 Victorian and 1 from New South Wales. These accolades are a testament to their excellence, but awards alone do not tell the whole story. The Parhammers are not just good business people, they are generous and community-minded family. And now joined by their son Thomas, the Parhammer legacy is set to continue, ensuring this remarkable business will remain a cornerstone of our local economy for years to come. I congratulate the Parhammer family on their incredible success.
Call the member for Bass.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, today I rise to share another contribution to the Raise Our Voices Australia campaign, this time from Erin Cool in my electorate, who's written about youth engagement, education and representation in politics and the benefit of volunteering. She says, this year's Voices of Tasmania report found that 97% of Tasmanians do not feel represented. Young Tasmanian voting enrolment is lower than ever. Many of my classmates have no idea who their representatives are or have been ignored for so long they've given up on making their voices heard. I want this to change. Firstly, our broken civics education must be reviewed. In senior secondary classrooms, we should ensure that all young Tasmanians are enrolled to vote, know how to cast informed votes, and know how to access representatives when they need them. Additionally, in both our state and federal government, ministerial diary disclosure laws could be introduced to allow the public to see who politicians are meeting with, whose concerns they really care about, and whose voices have the most influence over bills being developed. Finally, we must ensure that people aren't needlessly left out of our democracy. Currently, prisoners serving 3 years or more are barred from voting, and despite overwhelming campaigning, 16 and 17-year-olds are still denied a vote. In the space of 10 years, these changes would demonstrate a commitment to all Tasmanians by ensuring we're empowered, educated and representative. Politics should reflect all voices. Volunteering for charities has changed my life. Far from giving up my time, these organisations have given so much back to me, and in 10 years I'd love to see more young people involved. At Salvo's stores Launceston, I built my interpersonal skills in a supportive team. These soft skills make young people more employable and confident. Additionally, youth often feel powerless about the problems in their communities. When I started volunteering, my mental health improved significantly with a direct way to help. Lastly, volunteering also bridges age, cultural and socio-economic divides. Engaging with people in need makes our youth better informed, empathetic and motivated by others' struggles. In this way, volunteering has set me up for a lifetime of change making. However, youth volunteers face financial, access and time pressures. These could be solved by awarding TCE points for volunteering as part of senior secondary education, subsidising public service fees like transport for youth who give back to their community, would reward work and ease financial pressures. And finally, schools should promote volunteer opportunities and recognise those who give back to their communities. Tasmania needs volunteers. In 10 years, investment in volunteering would help both our communities and youth thrive. Thanks for your contribution, Erin. It's been my privilege to share them in this place today.
Call the member for Robinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And recently my team and I had the pleasure of visiting a magnificent local small business in Empire Bay named Sorrento Pizzeria. Sorrento Pizzeria is owned by the friendly Mr. Elia Luigi Eliopoulo and produces exquisite tasting, authentic pizzas. Elia is incredibly passionate about his Italian ancestry, as well as his grandmother's pizza recipes, which originated from Naples and are over 100 years old. Elia uses these recipes at Sorrento Pizzeria and are why his customers keep coming back for more. And I can wholeheartedly say that I have not had pizzas that have tasted so good, Deputy Speaker. While my team and I were enjoying their pizzas, he explained to his intriguing family history. His grandmother grew up in Naples and began the family tradition more than 100 years ago by learning how to bake bread and how to make pizzas. This tradition and the recipes were passed down to his mother and after his family emigrated to Australia. Elia has fond memories of growing up in Marrickville in Sydney, enjoying these pizza recipes every Friday night after school. Fast forward to today, and he is keeping with the family tradition and recipes alive through his exceptional Sorrento Pizzeria. He is often supported by his young children around the restaurant, Sophie and Jack, where the pizza-making knowledge is again being passed down to the next generation. Sorrento Pizzeria has also just recently been named one of 9 Australian winners of the Square 50 Awards, facilitated by the global fintech company Square. Square 50 celebrates businesses reaching major milestones within their operations. After receiving more than 1,000 submissions from across the globe, 50 businesses were selected to be part of this year's best, which included Sorrento Pizzeria on the mighty Central Coast in New South Wales. This remarkable achievement underscores Sorrento Pizzeria's commitment to its high-quality pizzas, outstanding customer service and authentic Italian experience. I would like to take this opportunity to commend Mr. Eliapullo on his amazing pizzeria. My team and I were blown away by your delicious pizzas and friendly staff. Congratulations on your global recognition, and thank you for being an excellent businessman and employer of young people on the Central Coast. I look forward to visiting again soon. Keep up the phenomenal work. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
I call the member for Barker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, I rise to pay tribute to a stalwart of the Limestone Coast community, Mr. Fred Lindsay Ellis, who recently passed away. A family man, a community man, a farmer. Fred Ellis was also one of the last remaining World War II veterans of the Limestone Coast. He joined the Royal Australian Navy when he was 17 and served as an able seaman on HMAS Cowra, searching for sea mines around southern Australia, the Solomon Islands and New Guinea. Following his service, Fred married Kathleen, and after a few years they acquired a grazing block at Canunda, near Millicent in South East. There they raised 6 children. Life on the farm presented its challenges, especially schooling for the children. Like all great Aussie farmers, Fred and Kath were resilient and innovative. They had no telephone for the first 4 years until they built their own line, running 1.5 miles across to connect to the nearest service. It took 10 years before they had a proper road to town. Rabbit control was a priority. They trapped, fumigated and ripped, but also had fun as a family, spotlighting at night. Family was central to everything they did. Whether it was rabbit control, shearing, lamb marking or cattle work, everyone pitched in. Throughout his life, Fred was deeply involved in the community. He contributed to public affairs, schools, sports, church activities, the Caledonian Society, the Lodge, the RSL and the Agricultural Bureau, of which he was a life member. He served 2 terms as a Millicent District Councillor in the late 1960s and early 1970s, and was a Justice of the Peace for 30 years, retiring at the age of 80. He was the longest-serving member of the Millicent Lions Club with a Herculean 58 years of dedication, which also earned him life membership. Fred was instrumental in the formation of the Keith Lions Club. Fred drove his Holden Statesman with no bull bar to Keith every fortnight for 12 months until the club finally got up and running. Fred, as a good Methodist, reckoned God was always on his side and never hit a roo on the way home. In 2015, Fred was honoured to be named Millicent Senior Citizen of the Year in recognition of his service to the community. Fred Ellis was a humble, generous and caring man, dedicated to his family, his farm and his community. Fred's life was one of purpose and dedication. His strength, his humility, his kindness touched all who knew him, leaving a lasting impact. Madam Deputy Speaker, Fred's legacy continues to inspire me, as I know it does so many others in the Limestone Coast community. Vale, Fred Lindsay Ellis.
I call the member for Hunter.
Speaker, this year students in my electorate of Hunter took part of the Raise Our Voices campaign. Today I want to read a speech from Ella. Speaker, a lack of suitable housing and ever-growing interest rates have single-handedly cost Australians millions of dollars a year, money which is not helping its citizens but making the current crisis much worse. Did you know that over 1/3 of Australian citizens find it difficult to live on their current salary? That's nearly 9 million Australians. The high demand and low supply is destroying the housing market, while rising interest rates are frightening buyers and Australians are starting to see the effects. Without action, within 10 years, living in Australia will become so expensive that many will be forced to migrate, leaving Australians who are willing to stay with a decade of debt and irreparable economic damage. The Australian people are praying for a change, whether the government works with banks to decrease interest rates or provide further subsidies for people willing to build housing. Something needs to change, and it needs to be done now. A change needs to work towards the idea of people can live in a country without the worrying of paying more in rent or mortgages than they are earning. Without a reasonable solution, soon the Australian population will be on the receiving end of unrepairable financial damage. Thanks, Ella, for raising these very important issues. Speaker, today I want to read a speech from 13-year-old Hayden. I'd like to discuss a major issue within Australia, and that is homelessness. My concern for this group started when I was just 9 years old and on a school excursion to Sydney. At night, every 100 steps and under every bridge there would be a group of homeless people struggling to stay warm with what little they had. I felt a strong sense of sympathy in that moment, and I strongly believe Parliament should feel the same. The homelessness rate in Australia right now is 0.47%, which is currently around 120,000 people. But if we don't act now, the homelessness rate can and will increase more than ever before, especially now with cost of living crisis that we are currently going through. This is really what we want. Is this really what we want people to see in our country and go to see when they go to see our biggest cities? Groups of homeless people at every turn, and because we did nothing about it when we had the chance to. It's certainly not what I want, and I'm sure you don't want it either. Thank you, Hayden. This is certainly a big issue and something that we all want to see fixed. Thank you.
In accordance with Standing Order 193, the time for members' constituency statements has concluded, and I call on the clerk.
Private members' business, notice number 1 for a motion in relation to healthcare.
Call the member for Brisbane.
Thank you, Speaker. I move the motion as circulated in my name. Well, back in 2013, I was living in the United States in Florida, working for a little company called Disney. I had an experience there that really set me up for getting into politics for the rest of my life, where I'd never really been that interested in politics growing up, not from a political family per se. But I walked into the stockroom of where I was working one day, and one of my co-workers was on the floor in literal tears. And obviously, as any normal person would do, I went up to her and asked what's wrong, what's happened. And she was having to make the decision about whether she paid her rent or paid for her insulin. And I just remember in that moment thinking, I don't understand how this has happened. I don't understand how we can be working for this giant billion, trillion-dollar company, getting paid $7 an hour, and you've been put in this position where you have to decide between fundamental health care or fundamental housing. It's an impossible decision. Now, we were able to rally around and raise some money for her, but I just kept thinking that was only going to help her for 1 month. It wasn't going to actually change the system that we were living in, where she had been put into that position. And so, we hear all these horror stories that come out of the United States about their healthcare system, and we just cannot go down that same path. Having lived it and having seen people that have lived it and have been at the brutal end of that system, we cannot do that. We have to turn the ship around now before we head down that path. Because universal healthcare is vital to Australia. Everyone deserves to have access to quality healthcare, including dental care and including mental health care, regardless of where you live, how old you are, or whatever your bank balance may be. Now, a properly funded universal healthcare system actually saves us money in the long run. It reduces poverty, it creates jobs, drives economic growth, and helps to alleviate inequality. But our healthcare system as it stands is starting to falter. Now, at the same time, nearly 1 in 3 large corporations operating in Australia pays no income tax. Large corporations are able to use various offsets to be able to pay no tax, while everyday Australians can't afford to go to the doctor. The system is fundamentally broken, and we are all living it. Now, bulk billing options are plummeting around the country. Most people with a Medicare card are unable to find a bulk billing appointment like they used to. Now, in my electorate of Brisbane, just a few % of clinics still offer bulk billing at all. And what's more, finding bulk bill appointments outside of general working hours has become almost impossible. What this means is people skipping regular health appointments, prioritising their kids' health over their own, not following up on test results, or avoiding care altogether because going to the doctor has become too expensive. People are waiting until issues are critical and then presenting to emergency rooms. Those healthcare horror stories that we all judge the United States for, they are well on their way to becoming a reality here. So what we need to do is we need to triple the bulk billing incentive for everyone with a Medicare card and establish at least 6 free local healthcare clinics in each electorate to enable all Australians to go to the GP for free.
Hear, hear.
Now, according to a recent Black Dog Institute poll, the key leading reason for Australians delaying or not seeking mental health care is the cost. And sadly, but unsurprisingly, it's young adults being impacted the most. 60% of those aged 18 to 24 reported they couldn't afford to get the help they needed, more than across any other age group. In order to access mental health care sessions through Medicare, you need a mental health care plan through a GP. After that pandemic, these subsidised sessions were cut from 20 to 10 per year. And that's just the subsidy. It rarely covers the full cost. Like GP visits, it's become incredibly difficult to access sessions without a gap payment. There are also extra hoops to jump through to access the final 4 sessions. You need another GP referral, for example, which again is going to cost you more and more money. When it comes to mental health care in this country, for every person receiving treatment, at least one person is also going without. We have to bring mental health fully under Medicare. And finally, everyone should be able to go to the dentist when they need help. Now, millions of Australians are putting off going to the dentist because they can't afford it. This doesn't just lead to worse teeth, but a range of other health concerns also come from that. Now, the first thing I did after being elected to this place was go back to the dentist to get some fillings done because I couldn't afford them while I was working in my retail job. Because I left it so long, fillings become root canals and become exponentially more expensive. And you shouldn't have to become a politician just to be able to afford to get your teeth fixed. Having healthy teeth should not be a luxury. Everyone should be able to use their Medicare card to go to the dentist. We have to bring mental health and dental care fully into Medicare.
Hear, hear.
Is there a seconder for the motion?
I second the motion and reserve my right to speak.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Fraser.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. There are parts to this motion that I don't disagree with, and indeed the underlying sentiment of the motion, which is to broaden access to core medical services, I do agree with. And indeed, the fact that Labor introduced Medicare in the 1980s and has supported it significantly since then is one aspect of the Labor Party's legacy which I'm most proud of. I've thought about this a lot, I've written about it, I've undertaken research in relation to it. For me, it is one of the most important functions of government. Where I don't agree with this motion is the extent to which it doesn't acknowledge the constraints, and what it basically puts forward is an unrealistic wish list of things that the mover of the motion would like to see achieved immediately. And what I'm going to point out is that in the context of what we had inherited when we came to government, there has been a very significant turnaround in the underlying stability of the Medicare system, and one that is all the more significant given the constraints that this government has been operating under. When we came to government, we inherited government from 10 years of neglect of Medicare, among other policy issues, a freeze in Medicare rebates for 6 years. I mean, this was a government, the previous government, of course, was one in their first horror budget which had tried to introduce a co-payment. So the previous government, both through financial neglect and at times through ideological misadventure, had tried to undermine Medicare. And what we saw was a whole range of pressures building up. We saw pressures building up where GPs and others in the healthcare system were increasingly unable to offer bulk billing. And it is important to look at the particular timeline of bulk billing, But what's really important, rather than looking at a year-to-year change alone, is to look at the underlying pressures that had been building up. And what is clear is that by the time we got to the 2022 election, all too many doctors were facing a situation where they were just not able to offer bulk billing at the rates they would have liked to, or indeed at all. Indeed, the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners took the extraordinary step around this time of calling on every GP in the country to stop bulk billing to maintain the viability of general practice. Dr. Karen Price said that this is why, as a college, I'm exhorting everybody, including my own practice, to move as many people as you can onto private billing. So there was a huge pressure building in the system, and that was something which was going to play out in very dramatic and adverse fashion, particularly for the most vulnerable. Now, what happened when we took over is that we dramatically increased funding to strengthen Medicare. We increased funding by $6.1 billion in the 2023-24 budget, $6.1 billion, a historic investment, particularly given the state of the overall economy, and that was backed up by an additional $2.8 billion in the 24-25 budget. So to put it in context, this government has delivered more than double the amount of indexation in relation to Medicare than the previous government did in a decade. And all of that at a time when government's fiscal position has been under strain. Now, at the same time, we've put into place very significant measures in relation to cheaper medicines, a 60-day prescription, a cap of $31.60 for medicines on the PBS. All of these measures have saved billions across the community, but significantly for those most vulnerable, they have been particularly benefited. And I can speak for people in my electorate of Fraser, the cheaper medicines initiatives that this government has brought in have been particularly welcome. Now, the Medicare urgent care clinics, we have opened 77 Medicare urgent care clinics across Australia, including 19 already of the 29 Medicare urgent care clinics announced in this year's budget. There have been almost 860,000 visits to Medicare urgent care clinics across Australia, and all of these have been completely bulk billed. So this is a significant measure, and given where these are located, including one in my own electorate, and again I've talked to people that have used that and seen the benefits that it has produced. So this government has turned around this system. It has responded to the underinvestment and neglect and ideological poor positioning from the previous government, and the Medicare system is much stronger, thankfully, than it was when we came to power.
Member for Griffith.
Deputy Speaker, I've spoken many times in Parliament about bringing dental into Medicare, and in response we have received literally thousands of comments on social media from people across Australia describing their own shocking experiences. And so rather than give another long speech, I'm going to let the comments of everyday Australians on Instagram and TikTok make a stronger argument for dental into Medicare than I ever could. 1. Never even needed a filling in my life, but 7 years living with a single tooth infection, need it taken out by a highly trained surgeon because of where roots are positioned. Unless I hit the jackpot, I have no idea how I'll afford surgery. I laugh when people say we're the lucky country with the best medical system. I'd have to sell my car to see a surgeon. The cruelest thing humanity has normalised is only the wealthy having access to proper healthcare. 2, I legitimately nearly died because of a tooth infection because they told me it would cost $6,000. I don't even have that in savings. 3, 6 times this year we have put off our dental appointments. 4, I have a huge broken molar, been there for a year because living week to week doesn't enable one to get dental care. 5, I just started having tooth sensitivity yesterday on a root canal tooth, and now I'm stressing. It's going to cost so much, I'm freaking out. 6, as a paramedic, I've seen patients with severe toothaches and infections because they couldn't afford the dentist. This is a false economy, and it is a flawed system which is causing the problem. 7, just lost a filling yesterday, and the anxiety and stress I'm feeling is unbearable. 8, teeth literally falling out of my face, but I don't have the thousands of dollars for the work needed. 9, I was told after getting my two bottom teeth removed that I was not allowed further treatment because I was on a carer's pension. 10, I can't afford for our family of 5 to go to the dentist for a checkup and clean. We are 18 months over time since we should have gone last. I'm ruining my kids' teeth because I can only pay the mortgage and bills and that's it. I don't have $1,500 for the 5 of us to go. 11. I sat here watching this with a wild toothache that I can't afford to get seen. Makes me so angry. 12. My mortgage is half my paycheck. Just told I need 2 crowns and a root canal, which is $6,000. Otherwise, I lose my teeth. I can't afford it. I have no savings. I don't know what to do. I can't take out a loan. 13. I have a huge hole in my tooth. I can't afford a dentist. It's now to the stage where I've shred the nerves in that tooth. 14. I'll have to take out my super to fix my teeth. Shouldn't have to, but it's the only option. 15. I'm in so much pain from my teeth, my doctor thought I was having arthritis near my eye and sent me for a CT scan. But my rent is half my pay and food is the other half. And finally, in the last two, 16. Why are my mouth bones different to the rest of the bones in my body? Good question. 17. But who needs teeth when we can buy submarines? And let's be clear about this. The total cost of bringing dental comprehensively into Medicare over the next 4 years would be $46 billion, as costed by the Independent Parliamentary Budget Office. $46 billion. In context, 1/3 of Australia's largest corporations pay no tax on hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue. There are big, large multinational gas corporations that pay less tax than a nurse, despite earning tens of billions of dollars in income. Let's not kid ourselves. The country is wealthy enough to bring dental into Medicare, and yet you hear these stories from people across Australia who are suffering as a result of a political and economic system who always puts everyday Australians last when the financial interests of large multinational corporations are threatened. We have a plan, for instance, to raise taxes on the super profits of large multinational corporations. Over 10 years, it would raise $500 billion, $500 billion. It could cover bringing dental and mental health into Medicare. It could cover making sure everyone could see a GP for free. But instead, right now, that money is going into the profit margins of large multinational corporations. The stories I just read then should not happen in a wealthy country like Australia. The stories that I read just then are preventable if we had a political class with the guts to stand up to multinational corporations who right now get away often with paying $0 in tax. We can bring dental and mental health into Medicare. We can ensure everyone can see a GP for free. We can ensure that the millions of Australians right now who skip seeing the dentist because they can't afford to pay have some light at the end of the tunnel.
I call the member for Hunter.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Labor is the party of Medicare. We will always protect Medicare and we'll always do what we can do to strengthen it. As an Australian, one of the things that I'm most proud of is that no matter how much money you make, you can have access to world-class healthcare. And this is because Medicare is fundamentally about universal healthcare. It means that anyone and everyone can get access to the care they need when they need it using their Medicare card and not their credit card. This is something that should always be protected, and that's why we have made historic investment in Medicare throughout our first term of government. Medicare went through some tough and scary times under the former coalition government, especially under the reign of the current Leader of the Opposition, who was at the time labelled as the worst health minister in living memory. Well, Speaker, what a reference that is to have on your CV when applying for the job of Prime Minister. The Leader of the Opposition will say he cares about everyday hard-working Australians, but he'll make it harder for you to see a doctor when you're sick, just like he did when he was the king of cuts of Medicare. He doesn't care about how hard you work, he cares about how much money you make, and if you don't make enough money, you don't get to see a doctor. But this is why strengthening Medicare has been one of our top priorities. In 2023, we delivered the biggest indexation boost for Medicare in 30 years. This year, we delivered the second largest increase with almost $900 million in additional funding for Medicare. And this is where our approach towards Medicare sticks out like a sore thumb compared to the approach of the Coalition, because this government has delivered more than double the amount of indexation to Medicare than the previous government did in almost a decade. We're also focused on making it easier to see a doctor. Peter Dutton, doing Peter Dutton things, froze Medicare rebates when he was Health Minister. This is a trend that lasted for 6 years under the coalition government, and as a consequence, it left the financial viability of general practice in serious trouble. That's why we have tripled the bulk billing incentive from the 1st November last year in the largest investment to bulk billing in history. This has been a national increase of 1.7 percentage points in the first year and 5.4 million additional visits. We have opened 77 Medicare urgent care clinics across Australia, and I know for a fact that the people of Cessnock and surrounds are forever grateful for the urgent care clinic in my electorate, which has helped thousands of people who need access to health care. But unfortunately, the opposition want to cut these too. We have also committed to reforming the mental health and suicide prevention systems, ensuring that Australians receive equitable access to the care they need. Providing free mental health services through a network of 61 walk-in Medicare mental health centres. 2 of these are in my electorate, in Muswellbrook and Cessnock, and the impacts they are having are clear to see. There are always improvements that can be done to Medicare, and perhaps including dental is one of those improvements. I know that the Greens, as a party, will never come close to forming government. They think that you can sprinkle some fairy dust and just click your fingers, Deputy Speaker, but unfortunately that's not how this world works. That's not how governments work, and including dental in Medicare isn't something that can be done overnight. But we are committed to the long-term goal of expanding Medicare to dental health services, and that work is currently ongoing. Speaker, Labor will always be the party that prioritises issues that have real impact on people's lives. The Albanese Labor government are the party who made the largest ever investment to Medicare, and the Coalition are the party who made the largest ever cuts to Medicare. They just don't care about Aussies being able to afford to go see a doctor. So when you cast your vote, look at our track record and the things that matter, like Medicare, and then look at the track record of the Leader of the Opposition and their coalition team. This will make clear who really looks after you and who really stands up for the things that matter in your life. An Albanese Labor government cares about Medicare and cares about you. So please make sure you cast your vote wisely when it comes to having that choice. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
The time allotted for this debate has expired. The debate is adjourned and the resumption of debate will be made in order of the day for the next sitting, and I call the clerk.
Private members' business, notice number 2 for a motion in relation to student loans.
And I call the member for McNamara.
Thank you very much, Acting Speaker. And I move the motion relating to student loans in the terms in which it appears on the notice paper. Yep, all good. Acting Speaker, education changes lives. And like many members in this place, I had the absolute privilege of attending university, Monash University. And my alma mater has one of their incredible campuses in my electorate in Caulfield. However, my grandparents on my father's side left school when they were teenagers. They didn't have the opportunity to attend university and access higher education, and it wasn't because of aptitude. They were brilliant, but opportunity was not afforded to them. They moved to Australia in search of freedom, opportunity, and equality. And part of that was the ability for their children to have the opportunities that they didn't, to have their grandchildren have the opportunities that they didn't. And that is what the HEC system is all about. It's about ensuring that everyone can have access to higher education studies. It's about ensuring that everyone has opportunity to climb the ladder in Australia. And I know how much education has changed my family's life, and I know how much education has changed other Australians as well. The reality is that HECS was never designed for young people to have lifelong debt. And I've spoken to countless members of our community who feel the burden of student debt right now. In McNamara, we have approximately 27,000 people who are facing student debt, HECS debt. They're feeling it at the supermarket, they're feeling it when they pay their bills, they're feeling it when thinking about whether or not they can afford to buy a home. And that is why I was so proud of the announcement that we made last week, or a couple of weeks ago, where the Minister for Education announced that we will wipe off 20% of all student debt. That will wipe around $16 billion of student debt for around 3 million Australians. It isn't just university debt, it also includes debt from TAFE courses and apprenticeship loans. Now, for someone with a HECS debt of $27,600, they'll see around $5,500 wiped from their loan next year. And additionally, we announced our plans to make the repayment system fairer by cutting the repayment rate, as well as increasing the threshold before one starts to pay it off. Now, for someone on an income of $70,000, this means they'll pay around $1,300 less per year in repayments. Now, we know Australians are doing it tough right now, and fundamentally this is about giving young people a bit more support that they need right now. They shouldn't have to be worrying about paying off their HECS debt until they're earning a sustainable income. Now, last week the Minister for Education joined me in the great electorate of Macnamara, and we had a coffee in Windsor with some young university students who were at different stages of their university degree and were talking about what this meant to them. And they also told us about the increases of humanities degree, the cost of humanities degree, and can I say, Acting Speaker, as a student of the humanities, I completely support the idea of making sure that humanities are not too expensive and that we encourage critical thought, writing, literature and history, and of course politics. Now, our reforms not only provide cost of living relief for people when they need it most, but it also is about making sure higher education is there and opportunity is there for those where they need it and wherever they live across our great country, including those from regional Victoria. All up, our government will wipe approximately $20 billion in student debt loans and wipe an initial $3 billion for approximately 3 million Australians. Now, the recent announcement was on top of the budget announcement we made earlier this year to make indexation fairer and wipe an initial $3 billion of student debt. These recent changes provide significant relief for students while continuing to protect the value of the HELP and other student loan systems, which has meant that more people, more young people, can get access to higher education. Across my electorate, we have some fantastic higher education providers, including Monash University in Caulfield and, of course, the University of Melbourne in Southbank, just to name a couple. And I know how much accessing these universities, as well as so many of our great universities in Victoria and across our country, means to the lives of young Australians. And it should be hard. University is hard. You should have to work hard in order to complete it. But it also should be possible, Acting Speaker, and so should paying off your student debt. We're making changes, we're making it fairer, we're reducing that debt, and we're going to make sure that more young people can have access to university in this great country of ours.
Is there a seconder for the motion?
I second the motion, reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. I call the member. Member for Boothby.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Australia is a country with a bright future for our citizens. A future made in Australia, the National Reconstruction Fund, energy transition, these are all big policies that are driving industry and opportunity that every Australian will benefit from, whether it is from secure, well-paid jobs that they will create, the services they will benefit from, or the thriving economy. The one thing that all these strategies need is a skilled workforce. And for many of these jobs, an apprenticeship, university or TAFE qualification is the entry ticket. When we came into government, we inherited workforce shortfalls across the economy. There wasn't a sector that I didn't hear from telling me how hard it was to get the skilled workforce they needed. Tradies, health sector, retail services, manufacturing, defence, the list goes on. The previous government ran down TAFE and universities, cutting their funding, jacking up the cost of degrees, and making students and graduates pay their HECS or HELP debt when they could least afford it, as they were setting up their career and setting up their lives post-qualification. No wonder there was a shortage of skilled workers. This government knows that many students are doing it tough, and that's why we're changing the way that HELP debt is calculated. Legislation is currently before Parliament to make the indexation rate the lower of CPI and the wages price index, and we're backdating that to the 1st of June 2023. This makes indexation fairer and wipes around $3 billion in student debt for more than 3 million Australians. And it means that your HECS or help debt won't go up faster than your wages. Around 80% of those who will benefit from this change are 40 years of age or under, and 50% are 30 years of age or under, the same people who are trying to set up their lives while they establish their career, maybe buy a house, start a family. This is practical and direct cost of living measure to help them at the stage of life that they need it most. We also heard from students required to do unpaid pracs as part of their qualification. Some of them had to give up paid work to complete their pracs. Some of them had to move from where they lived to a city and pay for accommodation and expenses away from home. Some just couldn't afford to do an unpaid prac, and so they didn't finish their qualification. That's an enormous loss to them, but it's also an enormous loss to the country. And so we're introducing paid pracs to social work, nursing, midwifery and teaching so that they can afford to complete their prac and complete their qualification. These reforms provide cost of living relief for students and graduates and make higher education better and fairer. We're also massively expanded and properly funded fee-free uni-ready courses to help students set up for success. We've doubled the number of regional university study hubs and established hubs in outer suburbs for the first time. We've established a national student ombudsman to investigate student complaints. And of course our massively popular fee-free TAFE program, which has delivered over 500,000 places so far and is set to be made permanent. What next? Glad you asked. A re-elected Albanese Labor government will wipe student debt by 20%. That will wipe a further $16 billion in student debts for around 3 million Australians. Apprenticeship loans, TAFE and university loans. When I paid my HECS debt, it was calculated at around 30% of the cost of the course. It's now 40%. Students nowadays are paying more per course than my cohort, and at a time when we want more apprentices, more TAFE and more university qualified workforce. We will also raise the income threshold at which you need to start repaying your student debt. The previous LNP government lowered it so that students and graduates on relatively low wages had to start repaying. But we want students and graduates to be able to set up their careers and their lives post-qualification. And we will also change the way the repayment is calculated so that the minimum repayment is lower. Deputy Speaker, we want Australians to have good, well-paid, secure jobs, and we want Australia to have the skilled workforce that we need to become an economic powerhouse in this changing world. Helping students and graduates with their student debt is a practical way to achieve both those things and help them with the cost of living.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Spence.
Thank you, Acting Deputy Speaker. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Education is the master key to opportunity for all Australians. Starting in the classroom at primary schools across the country, right through to the halls of Australian TAFE and university campuses. The doors unlocked for Australians in these buildings have created our families and our communities, as well as our very culture and the country we're so privileged to live in today. Make no mistake, there is no Australia without education. There's no Australia without the hard-working people who've learnt trades, who are quite literally building the nation brick by brick. And there is no Australia without the innovators across all disciplines who achieved their qualifications at Australian universities. That's why it is on us, in this place, to support these students who work so hard to build what's in front of us. It's on us to make sure that Australia's student loan system, which has given millions of Aussies the chance to study at tertiary level, is fair and affordable when someone enters the workforce. And that's what this Labor government is going to do. We're slashing 20% off all student loan debts, wiping a total of $16 billion worth of debt over 3 million Australians. We're making paying those debts more affordable by ensuring that students are starting repayment when they earn more. And we're also helping people with these debts to keep more of what they earn by lowering the rate of repayment. These changes build on this government's proposal to fix the help indexation rate as well, which, if passed, will save a student with an average help debt of around $1,200. This is significant, and as the motion suggests, it can't be understated. Taking pressure off the 3 million everyday Aussies paying off their student debt and helping them to pay it off sooner rather than later. It's policy that's fighting the cost of living in this country and helps level the playing field for millions of Aussies in electorates like Spence. It's a shame that there are members of the opposition, both in this House and the other place, that have referred to these changes as a cash splash that amount to waste. I'd like to ask those opposite if these changes are wasted on people like Isaac, someone who is currently studying a double degree in my electorate. He told me, and I quote, "I think that for a lot of us, HECS is seen as an investment in our own future. We forgo work and a stable income to pursue an education with the promise that we'll be better off once we graduate. In an entry-level law job, I stand to earn as little as $55,000 a year, slightly less than I made working a full-time admin job during COVID. Yet despite this, I'll meet the threshold for HECS repayments. These changes guarantee I will be earning a decent wage before I start paying it off, and that should be the case for all students. It's good to see that finally reflected by the government. Isaac is one of nearly 20,000 people in Spence with a help debt. And under a Labor government, he will be one of 20,000 people in my electorate paying off their student loans sooner and affordably, while earning more under a fairer system. On top of changing the game for former students, this commitment achieves something even more important in my view, especially considering the community I represent, and that's changing the game for future students. This goes back to what I said earlier. Education is the master key for opportunity in this country, and all Australians, regardless of who they are and where they're from, they need to be able to access it. This is especially important in disadvantaged areas of Australia, like the suburbs of Manapara, Elizabeth and Salisbury, which I represent. That's because in those suburbs and across Spence overall, we lag behind in rates of educational attainment. In the north, where families are already disadvantaged, not being able to afford and access higher education just embeds that disparity more and makes it harder to break intergenerational cycles of poverty. That's why reform to education, which includes the University Study Hub announced for Elizabeth over the weekend, are especially important for my community. Because by making the education system fairer and more affordable, by smashing barriers to give people greater access to university, education becomes a circuit breaker for people in the north, to lift themselves socially and economically and forge a better future for themselves and their loved ones. This is what a Labor government will never stop working towards. And that is what drives me each and every time I walk into this building. I commend the motion.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Hughes.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak on this motion brought by the member for McNamara, and I thank the honourable member for bringing this motion because it gives me an opportunity to speak about some of the failures of the Labor government in relation to education generally and specifically in the higher education sector. Deputy Speaker, just by way of background, this motion talks about the HELP indexation. And what we have seen that with escalating student debt, a direct consequence of Labor's high inflation and economic mismanagement, Labor is now proposing to change the way HELP indexation is calculated to the lower of the wage price index or the consumer price index. Thank you. Deputy Speaker, it changes how the HELP indexation is recalculated and backdates that indexation formula for 2 years, so that assuming this bill is passed, the indexation, for example, will be 3.2% on the 1st of June 2023 and 4% on the 1st of June 2024, rather than 4.7%. However, Deputy Speaker, this still means an overall increase in student debt of 11.1% in the face of this cost of living crisis directly attributable to the Albanese Labor government. This is still a kick in the guts for struggling students and the 3 million Australians still with a student loan. Most of these students will not see a refund, as Labor is trying to suggest, providing no cost of living relief whatsoever. This is because there'll be a rebate applied against each person's HELP loan account, which of course will lessen over time because of indexation, depending on how long it takes to pay off the debt itself. And Deputy Speaker, I do just make the comment that this is an attempt to assist some university students. What help has been proposed by this government to assist those who will never walk into a university? What help has been provided by this government to assist those people? What help is proposed to be provided by this government to ensure that more people, for example, more of our younger Australians and our older Australians who wish to return will have a good trades education, for example? We have a chronic housing shortage in this country, a chronic shortage of trades across the construction industry and particularly in our manufacturing industries, and I do not hear this government talking anywhere about how they are going to find more fitters, turners, machinists, those people that are the ones running our machinery within our factories, the ones that are producing manufactured goods and the ones that are really directly increasing our contributing to our GDP. A university education is very important, Deputy Speaker. A university education was the right pathway for me, but it is not necessarily the right pathway for everybody, and we should not be corralling students into a university education who are either unable academically to complete the course or who will be unable, when they do complete their degree, to find a well-paying and satisfying job into the future. This bill, though, and Labor's overall higher education policy is completely silent, for example, on encouraging universities to engage more with industry to ensure that our graduates that are coming out with very large debts will, in fact, be able to get into the workforce at the end of that time. And we do see a very large number of students, unfortunately, who are leaving university before they've completed their degree. I think also that there has been absolute silence from the Education Minister around what we are doing at the high school level and where we are encouraging our students, because clearly with the large dropout rates, this says to me that we are, from careers advisors in schools overall, we are encouraging students to go in and enrol in universities for degrees that they are either not able to complete or do not want to complete. And they are still leaving that university without a degree and with a massive debt. So to conclude, Deputy Speaker, I say that the federal Labor government has absolutely failed in the university sector. Thank you.
There being no further speakers, the debate is adjourned and the resumption of the debate will be made in order for the next sitting day. I call the clerk.
Private members' business, notice number 3 for a motion in relation to a proposed select committee on quantum funding.
I call the member for Bradfield.
I move the motion relating to a proposed select committee on quantum funding in the terms in which it appears on the notice paper. The Albanese Labor government's decision to invest almost $1 billion of taxpayers' money into the American company Quantum raises several serious questions which warrant scrutiny. Since the announcement was first made by the Prime Minister and the Minister for Industry and Science on the 30th of April, the opposition has sought to hold up to scrutiny this extraordinary bet which has been made with public money, and the government has trenchantly resisted that scrutiny at every stage. That is why I am today moving to establish a parliamentary inquiry so that we can find out what happened and who is responsible. The Albanese government has chosen to bet a very large amount of public money on one particular company pursuing one particular technology path within the broad field of quantum, a field in which people who have worked for 20 or 30 years cannot say with certainty which of the many paths being explored is likely to achieve a successful outcome. On any view, it will be at least several years and very possibly longer before the technology being developed by quantum is proven to work, if it can be proven to do so at all. We know that a very poor process was followed to get to this decision. The Albanese government agreed to assess an unsolicited proposal from quantum as early as November 2022, 2 months before external probity advisors were engaged. The Department of Industry, Science and Resources entered into a non-binding agreement with PsiQuantum in June 2023, yet the government points to an expression of interest process which commenced only in August 2023. It was an expression of interest process in which companies were invited to participate by one email only. There were no follow-up telephone calls, there was no second email. Those who were invited to participate were told they could not speak with Australian government officials. This was after PsiQuantum had been speaking for more than 8 months with Australian government officials, up to and including the minister, who had visited their premises in California and had met with them directly. We now know the terms of the expression of interest. It essentially asked respondents to match the promise made by PsiQuantum of building a fault-tolerant, error-corrected quantum computer by 2030. Many in the sector are extremely sceptical that this can be done, but scepticism is not welcome in Minister Husick's regime. We know that Minister Husick has a particular interest in venture capital firm Blackbird. In October 2022, he appointed Claire Birch of Blackbird to the National Quantum Advisory Committee. In December 2022, he appointed Kate Glazebrook of Blackbird to the Industry, Innovation and Science Australia Board. In May 2023, he launched the National Quantum Strategy with Nomad Atomics, a Blackbird-funded company. On 30 April this year, he announced almost $1 billion in funding for PsiQuantum, a company in which Blackbird is an investor. Blackbird and the many other investors in this company, of course, greatly benefited from that decision and that announcement. It is on the record that there is a close personal friendship between the Minister's senior advisor, Ellen Broad, and Blackbird executive, Kate Glazebrook. I have written to the Auditor-General requesting that the Australian National Audit Office undertake an investigation into the Australian Government's investment in PsiQuantum, and the Auditor-General has responded that a potential investigation is being considered. There are many aspects of what happened here which are very concerning, and there needs to be a parliamentary inquiry to get to the bottom of this decision and the reasons for it, and many other aspects of what happened. We know that a Deputy Secretary who advised against this commitment of funding subsequently left the department after being on gardening leave for a considerable period of time. We know that Export Finance Australia was directed to commence work on providing the funding even before the expression of interest process had concluded. The sad reality is, Deputy Speaker, as a consequence of this decision, Australian taxpayers are now exposed to almost $1 billion of their money being put at risk in what is a remarkably speculative venture. The Minister has publicly stated that he welcomes scrutiny of this investment. Now is the time for him to back those words with action. If he's serious, he will arrange for this resolution to be brought on for a vote and for Labor to vote in support of it.
I thank the Manager of Opposition Business. Is the motion seconded?
Second the motion and reserve my right to speak.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Swan.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'm glad to have the opportunity to talk about this motion brought forward by the member for Bradford. And I feel like this has been a similar theme and that we've been here before, talking about science and the future. On a previous occasion, I spoke about the nature of science. Science isn't about guesswork or clinging to the past, it's a methodology. It's about facts, evidence, and taking actions based on that evidence. But here we are again, and what's the opposition up to this time? I feel like they're stuck in, is it the 70s, the 80s or the 90s, refusing to embrace the future. Well, let me tell them something. The future is coming, and it's coming fast, and the future is quantum computing. And in my electorate of Swan, we indeed are leading the change. Swan is home to the most powerful research supercomputer in the Southern Hemisphere. It's called the Pawsey Supercomputer. It is a world-class facility that is doing incredible work. Back in September, I hosted a meeting with young people from Swan at the Pawsey Centre. We actually held a Changemakers conference because we wanted to talk about the future and what we could do to make our country a better place. And we did this and we hosted in this space because it was interesting to see the amazing contributions that quantum computing is making. And they're making leaps and bounds, and they're doing this by looking at the future and what we need for Australia. And let me tell you, Deputy Speaker, that they were enthralled. They saw this supercomputer and learnt about the possibilities that it creates. And that's what we're doing. We're preparing young people for the opportunities ahead. But this isn't just for young people, it's honestly for the whole country. Quantum computing is a game changer. It has the massive potential to transform industries, solve complex problems, and deliver benefits to all Australians. That's why we're not just talking about it, we're actually doing it. We're pushing forward. And meanwhile, what's the opposition doing? Tearing it down, ignoring the evidence, sticking to outdated ideas. Unlike them, Labor is embracing the evidence. And this goes back to advice that the government has been given. Back in 2023, our nation's chief scientist, Catherine Foley, said, "This is a high-risk, high-reward venture, but one that would position Australia as a truly deep tech country." She also said, "We have a chance to build the industry here. I can assure you I have not drunk the Kool-Aid. The assessment is based on evidence gathered." And this is based on evidence, not on Kool-Aid. And that's how we work as a government. The government is acting professionally and strategically to move quantum computing forward. We've done the homework. We're investing $470 million in equity and loans to build a fault-tolerant quantum computing with PSI Quantum. This isn't some off-the-cuff decision. This was a part of a methodical process. The process involved looking at the economics, the legal, commercials, technical, probity, and also national security advice. It was a whole of government effort. But that's how you get things done. But what do we get from the opposition? Blockers, not builders, constantly saying no, the no-alition. They said no to Intel when they wanted to set it up here. Now they're saying no to quantum computing. And it's the same tired playbook. And to say no to the future and to hold Australia back. Fortunately, the Albanese government isn't waiting around for their approval. We're taking action. We're preparing Australia for challenges and opportunities of tomorrow. Quantum computing is a part of that vision. It's about innovation. It's about jobs. It's about assuring Australia is a global leader in this space. This motion is another example of the opposition's refusal to engage with real work. It's nothing more than what we would expect, them saying no to progress. Well, I say no to their motion, and I say yes to the future, yes to science, yes to evidence, yes to the amazing potentials of quantum computing, and yes to a government that's getting the work done. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Casey.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And let's be very clear, the Coalition isn't opposed to quantum as a technology. I've advocated for testbed strategies for the whole Australian quantum industry in this House many times. We're opposed to this government picking one winner in quantum, a Silicon Valley-based American company, and having the audacity to put that under the Future Made in Australia program. And the member for Swan was happy to quote the chief scientist, Cathy Foley. There was a quote about PsiQuantum that the member for Swan and those opposite won't quote. So I'll quote it, and this is from the chief scientist. "I was also put off by the salesman push and lack of detail in the information provided and how it was presented." And that's how the chief scientist described the PsiQuantum pitch at the start of the process, before Minister Husey, because he does, brought his pressure to bear on her, and she gave some qualifiers. But she did also say, the chief scientist, that is about high risk. And that is what we've argued from the start. It is a high-risk strategy to put everything into one company in a contested field, particularly an American company. We've also have significant concerns about the process. I've spoken on multiple occasions about the email from PsiQuantum as a company to investors prior to the EOI process. And in that email, they were spruiking their advanced talks with the Australian government and the significant financial investment that they were going to get from the Australian government. They were spruiking that to investors before the EOI process had started. And so that leads to significant questions that PsiQuantum have to answer. If PsiQuantum are happy to take over $1 billion of Australian taxpayer money here in Canberra and in Brisbane in Queensland, they have to answer, were they misleading those potential investors? Were they misleading them by saying they had an advanced negotiation, or did they have that agreement with the Australian government and they were telling those investors in good faith before the EOI process started? They need to answer that question. That is why we need a committee hearing, so we can ask PsiQuantum, who are prepared to take $1 billion of taxpayer money, those questions. And the minister should be prepared to answer those questions. Why was this company spruiking it to investors before the EOI process had started? He said he was happy for this. The minister said he was happy for scrutiny to be brought. He should accept this committee's hearing, but we won't. He'll hide from this. But taxpayers deserve to know. They deserve to know about this sham process. The quantum industry is outraged. I was first alerted to this EOI process last year. I spoke in this chamber last year in November about the process and the concern from the industry that the EOI process was set up to pick a winner, to pick PsiQuantum. Lo and behold, in April this year, PsiQuantum was the winner of this tender process. And this is significant for the Australian quantum industry, because the Australian government is backing a Silicon Valley-based US company over Australian industry. Significant for quantum, but it's significant for all Australians, because this is under the Future Made in Australia banner, the supposed flagship of the Albanese Labor government. And if they are not prepared to answer questions about this investment under that banner, it puts into question every investment made by the Albanese Labor government under Future Made in Australia. And the reality, Deputy Speaker, is these questions have not been answered by this minister. If he's not prepared to answer these questions around these conflicts of interest, about this email that many in the industry have seen spruiking support, showing that the EOI process was set up to divert taxpayer money, then the Prime Minister should show some courage, and he should ask the minister to resign, because there's over $30 billion of taxpayer money tied up in the Future Made in Australia program, and this $1 billion is part of that. The Australian people need to have faith that taxpayer dollars are spent in the best interest of the quantum industry here in Australia, in the best interest of taxpayers, not in the best interest of the minister's friends in Silicon Valley.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Blair.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. By this motion, the Coalition clearly demonstrating they don't think Queenslanders deserve a world-leading project in Queensland that will strengthen the Queensland economy, improve Queensland jobs and increase its attractiveness for private investment in Queensland. They don't believe in a future made in Australia, the Coalition. They certainly don't believe in a future made in Queensland. Under our plans for a future made in Australia, we're going to see our country be able to stand on its own 2 feet, revitalising our manufacturing, a technological muscle that's withered under the previous Coalition government. That's why, together with the former Queensland Labor government, we've committed to invest $470 million in equity and loans in PSIQuantum. This is a world-leading global firm founded by 2 Australians. Those officers constantly talk about Silicon Valley. This is founded by 2 Australians, Jeremy O'Brien and Terry Rudolph. One of them born and raised in Queensland and both educated in Queensland. 2 of the world-leading experts in the area of quantum computing. The sad thing is every time the member for Bradfield and those opposite call this a US company, they're telling Jeremy and Terry, who are some of our smartest Australians, they don't want them here. They grew up here. They're Australians. And the Coalition doesn't believe in a future made in Australia and certainly doesn't believe in a future made in Queensland. These blokes are Australians. Like so many, they had to leave our shores because they didn't get their ideas backed enough. And now they want to bring those ideas back and build the world's first commercial-scale quantum computer in Brisbane in the state of Queensland, my home state. This will mean PSI Quantum, one of the highest valued quantum computing companies in the world, will establish its Asia-Pacific headquarters and a quantum manufacturing precinct in Queensland, creating 400 new high-paid jobs, not just for scientists, not just for experts in quantum computing, but lab technicians, welders, electricians and systems engineers. That's going to be great for Queensland, great for the Western Corridor outside of Ipswich and Springfield. Then they've hit the ground running already, announcing research and education partnerships with 5 leading Queensland universities. What has the Coalition got against Queensland? They're opening up new research and development lab at Griffith University's Nathan campus in Brisbane and building an Australian team. They're aiming to produce one of the most powerful computers on the planet that can crack problems that conventional computing can't achieve. Transforming drug development, aerospace, advanced manufacturing. It means jobs for Australians and jobs for Queensland. Opportunities for brilliant kids studying in Queensland and around Australia to stay here in Australia rather than, unfortunately, what they had to do is go with the brain drain overseas. So it's important for Queensland. And that Springfield City Group and my electorate are keen to establish a quantum tech education centre in Springfield to train the future workers we're going to need for quantum technology industry and related areas like AI, robotics and machine learning. This is an example of how PSI Quantum Project is unambiguously good for Queensland. And it's not just about Brisbane, it's about the regions as well, as I've alluded to. It means hundreds of jobs, boosting R&D capabilities, billions of dollars of direct investment in Australia by PSI Quantum, an investment that would have gone overseas. It means billions of dollars, an economic opportunity for Queensland, and a chance for Queenslanders right across our state to have careers in Queensland that will change the world. It's so disappointing to hear that the new LNP state government is reviewing half of the agreement to fund PSI Quantum. And that said, we're working constructively with them on a range of issues that will decide, hopefully, a bipartisan approach. But if they, I hope they don't listen to their colleagues and comrades down here in Canberra, because if they do, they'll be anti-science, they'll be anti-the future, they'll be anti-development, anti-jobs, anti-advanced manufacturings. They're anti-Australian the way they're going on today. You don't hear a word about the fact they're 2 Australians. It's constantly downplaying this. And as we have taken a whole-of-government approach, there's been national security, transparency, probity checks in relation to it. All those opposite can say is no to everything. They vote against bills like in the chamber that will advance the benefit of the country. But here today, they want to put a motion here that's anti-jobs, anti-Queensland, anti-economic development, turning their back on the future, always happy about the past. Go back to Menzies.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Sturt.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I appreciate the lecture from those opposite who are opposing a probity motion and a governance and integrity motion to merely look at something that, if there's nothing to be concerned about, the government should have no fear whatsoever in seeing progress. But we seem to have touched a nerve, Deputy Speaker, and they seem to be very concerned about any avenue that would see a bit of sunlight shone upon what seems to be a very, very murky deal that the government has done over this Quantum massive grant of Commonwealth and state funds. Now, I congratulate and express some relief that we have Premier Crisafulli now at the helm in Queensland, and the Queensland government share the same concerns that the federal opposition do about just what is going on with this $1 billion allocation of state and federal funds to this American company to build a quantum computer that's never been successfully constructed to this specification before, and in the process, why it is that so much murkiness and such shroud of secrecy exists and has been cast over the decision-making process. And as I say, it really does surprise me that the government has a problem with what this motion will do, which is establish an inquiry into all these things. Because if you've done nothing wrong, you've got nothing to fear and you should have nothing to hide. And what this motion would do, if successful, is have a process that, if you believe the government, will merely confirm that everything they've done when it comes to this $500 million commitment of Commonwealth funds to an American company called PsiQuantum, that it's all completely above board. Now, the member for Bradfield, who has moved this motion and brought it to this chamber, has made very important points in the past in scrutinising this. And obviously we know that there's been correspondence with the Auditor-General. There are other integrity bodies that may or may not want to have a look at this murky deal, and in particular some of the personalities that were involved in getting special access to the ministers that made these decisions, and what past connection those lobbyists might have had with said ministers. All these things would be good to flesh out, of course, in the inquiry that we're proposing through this motion here. And there was a time when, in the last Parliament, I was a part of the last government, when we got very consistent lectures from the now government about integrity and about looking at the things that the executive of government were doing. In fact, you know, if the shoe was on the other foot, I can just hear, my ears can ring with the sorts of bellowing that would be coming from the now Labor government about the need to support this motion. So they've got the opportunity, Deputy Speaker, to put their money where their mouth is, $500 million of money where their mouth is. They can honour their piousness from previous parliaments on topics like this, and particularly explain why, if they're not supporting this, what holding an inquiry into allocating $500 million of Commonwealth funding through very murky and questionable processes with no merit-based opportunity for others to compete for the sort of funds being allocated, why would an inquiry into this be something to fear? Why would there be a problem with the Parliament exercising our responsibility, which is the oversight of the executive, the oversight of the expenditure of Commonwealth funds? Why would there be anything to fear in supporting the establishment of this inquiry that the member for Bradfield brings before us today? Now, I certainly want to get to the bottom of the questions that we would be probing through this committee. I'd certainly like to be able to tell my constituents why this $500 million deal was done the way it was done, why it wasn't merit-based, why certain lobbyists were able to secure meetings with ministers and spruik the investment of this scale. And it's very interesting that the new Queensland government have the same concerns and are questioning whether they're going to put their investment in that was announced by the previous Labor government. Supporting this inquiry, if there's nothing to fear, should be something that this government does.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Bean.
Deputy Speaker, I'm grateful for the opportunity to contribute to this debate and join with my government colleagues to oppose this motion. As a member for Bean in the ACT in the nation's capital, which is home to many of Australia's leading high-tech users and developers, I'm acutely aware of the need for Australia to build our own capacity and to reduce our nation's dependency on overseas. And when it comes to quantum, it is a race. Deputy Speaker, the COVID era, with all the tragedy and suffering, provided us with a useful wake-up call that Australia must do better in terms of building our capacities in the space of the new technologies that are shaping our world today and will into the future. And whilst this motion is purely here as political play by the opposition and should be seen as such, I'm pleased this debate provides an opportunity to talk about some of the positive thinking and action being taken by this government in this space. Under our plans for a future made in Australia, the Albanese government is revitalising our manufacturing and technological muscle that just withered under a decade of coalition governments. But to grow in the years ahead, modern economies need strong manufacturing and technological capability. And that's why with the Queensland Government, we committed to investing almost $500 million in equity and loans to PsiQuantum, a globally leading firm founded again, to remind the opposition, by Australians, Jeremy O'Brien and Terry Rudolph, two of the world's leading quantum physicists. This will mean PsiQuantum, one of the highest valued quantum computing companies in the world, builds the world's first commercial scale quantum computer and establishes its Asia Pacific headquarters here in Australia. This is in keeping with Australia's first ever national quantum strategy, announced in May 2023 by this government. And it means hundreds of jobs, extra grant to our R&D capabilities, and billions of dollars of direct investment in Australia by PsiQuantum, investment that would otherwise have gone overseas. It means research and education scholarships, industry partnerships, supply chain opportunities, and a dedicated climate research centre. Since the Australian government announced this investment, the US government has followed suit, supporting PsiQuantum's second facility in Chicago. And PsiQuantum has already hit the ground running in Australia, announcing research and education partnerships with 5 Queensland universities, opening an R&D lab and building for an Australian team. Now, Deputy Speaker, we released the Chief Scientist's advice on this important investment, emphasising its impact on our local industries. And I quote, "It will attract the supply chains here and provide an uplift in adjacent industries like photonics and semiconductors, which are as critical as to human life now as water, food, housing and energy." The Chief Scientist described it as being our Taiwan moment. Just as Taiwan moved in the 1970s into semiconductors, here was our chance to be a global hub for the quantum industry. But the Coalition wants to take Australia backwards, whilst we want to invest in Australia's future. Now, look, we agree that process is important, and it's important to put on the record here that this was a rigorous, extensive whole-of-government process with economic, legal, commercial, technical, probity and national security advice. We drew on expertise from across government and outside it, including our Chief Scientist, who scrutinised PsiQuantum over many months, asking the hard questions. This is her ultimate conclusion. I support this as an opportunity. This is one opportunity that will mean Australia has a real quantum industry that is world-leading. Her assessment has been backed by the Technical Advisory Group, including scientists from CSIRO and the Defence Science and Technology Group, concluding PsiQuantum demonstrated extensive experience and considerable capability and the necessary capacity to pursue its technical roadmap. Deputy Speaker, the government also ran an expression of interest process in accordance with public sector advice to assure ourselves we weren't overlooking a competitor who might be as close as to PsiQuantum in delivering a fault-tolerant quantum computer. We've released that EOI assessment. It's not murky, it's incredibly transparent, and that assessment outlines the rigour taken by the assessment panel and technical advisory group with comprehensive probity advice. The panel found no applications were competitive or highly competitive. In the Chief Scientist's words, the EOI found PsiQuantum were a country mile ahead. But, Deputy Speaker, we shouldn't be surprised by a motion which is effectively an anti-jobs fishing expedition from the team that gave us the COVID app and robo-debt.
The time allotted for this debate has expired. The debate is adjourned and the resumption of the debate will be made in order of the day for the next sitting, and I call the clerk.
Private members' business. Next order of the day, resumption of debate on a motion relating to Medicare.
I call the member for Layla.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, on November 4th, members of this House gathered with GPs and doctors from around the country to celebrate the Stronger Medicare Awards. This was a significant event, and I'm pleased to say that Utopia, that Dr Lester Mascarenhas, who runs the Utopia Clinic in my electorate, that night became a Medicare champion for working in primary care. I was thrilled to be there with Dr Mascarenhas, with Lester, when he was called forward to receive this award, because the work that is done at Utopia is truly inspiring. This is a clinic established that is now actually a charity, but a clinic established to support refugee and asylum seekers who live in my community with their very real health needs. And Lester is an inspiration. In health fraternity, he's an inspiration. He and his partner, Vern, came to Canberra as part of, to be acknowledged for that work, and then were surprised to be named a Medicare champion. The work they do in my community is incredibly important, and it's important too to share the way Utopia came to be. It came to be not by imposing ideas upon a community about what was needed, but by working with a community outside of the health area, getting to know that community. Now, the highest number of refugees in my community come from Myanmar, of Karen, Karenni, Chin and Kachin background in terms of their ethnicities, who have settled in our area, and Utopia has become their go-to place for their health needs. Not surprisingly, because they have interpreters on the ground. They have specialist connections into infectious diseases. They really have shaped this clinic to support the community it's designed to support. So I want to celebrate Dr Mascarenhas, celebrate Lester and all who work at Utopia Refugee and Asylum Seeker Health, because they've changed lives of many who've chosen to call Melbourne's Outer West their new home. They spent a year in consultation before they established the clinic, and now the clinic has a unique model of care supporting the complex and often unmet needs of refugees and asylum seekers in my community. So a big congratulations to them. And the reason this government chooses to have a stronger Medicare awards is just one more way of ensuring people understand our commitment to Medicare, our commitment to bulk billing. Since coming to government, we've had an incredible turnaround from the previous government's policies on bulk billing, with the incentive tripling from the 1st of November last year, notably the largest investment in bulk billing in history. Since then, there have been 5.4 million additional estimated visits across Australia because of this government's investment. That's 103,000 visits to a GP a week. On top of that, we've introduced cheaper medicines. We've introduced a Medicare urgent care clinic, which of course we have one in my community as well, in Werribee, which is taking considerable pressure off our public hospital, the Mercy, by seeing patients, particularly the number of children that the urgent care clinic is seeing, and particularly in those busy times, busy sports times, after hours, after normal medical hours, particularly on weekends. More importantly though, this government for my community restored Wyndham's distribution priority area status after the Morrison Liberal government cut it. This meant that we lost 40% of GPs in some practices across the city of Wyndham. Those numbers are rebuilding back again since we restored the DPA status. With that and the tripling of the bulk billing incentive, we're seeing more GPs working longer hours and being open for longer hours in my local community, which means better health outcomes for many people. It also means that practices have an opportunity to do that kind of delivery, that kind of wraparound health services that we're seeing for our refugee and asylum seeker communities at Utopia. It means that the doctors who work in these clinics know that this government has their back, that this government is committed to Medicare and they're committed to primary health care. Thank you, Speaker.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Riverina.
Well, the distribution priority areas might be okay in the member for Lawler's electorate. Her electorate is just 17 kilometres north of Melbourne's central business district, but it's not there that the doctors are most needed. It's out in regional and particularly remote Australia, where they are now suffering because of the distribution changes brought about by this Albanese Labor government. And the Rural Doctors Association said the ink wasn't dry on the changes to the policy then doctors were already leaving the bush. Doctors were already leaving those areas in the country which were already doing it tough, doing it hard. I'm proud of the fact that I've put in place, as Deputy Prime Minister, the Murray-Darling Medical School Network. And that goes through Wagga Wagga, Orange, Mildura, Dubbo, so many places that were crying out for doctors, and not necessarily those regional hubs, but many of the little towns around them, many of the little bush hospitals that relied so heavily on those major country centres. And but for that rural medical school network, I don't know where they'd be. I don't know where some of those centres would get their doctors. And I heard the member for Lawler talking about the pharmaceutical dispensing changes. My goodness, country pharmacists, and there are more than 300, they are the only health professional in some of those 300 communities because they don't have a doctor. They don't have a hospital. They just have a chemist that was going to be forced to potentially shut because of that change, because of that new 60-day rule that Labor put into place. And then we look at health and we talk about bulk billing. And bulk billing rates have fallen dramatically, 11% under Labor's watch. Now, if Labor can stand here, if Labor members can get up and claim that we are better served health-wise under them than under the previous coalition government, well, I tell you what, they are absolutely kidding themselves, and they are indeed misleading the House. Now, I am very pleased to talk about the record of the former coalition government in health. Over 94 million telehealth consultations through Medicare to 16 million patients. Now, telehealth is just not the answer. We need professionals, face-to-face. But I tell you what, in rural centres where sometimes you just can't get that face-to-face contact, then telehealth is doing the job. 857 new medicines listed on the pharmaceutical benefit scheme since 2019, just since 2019, in that last term of government alone. More than 128,000 Australians supported by Headspace each year. And I know everybody across the parliament would agree that Headspace is doing a great job with mental health with our young people. 1,400 additional nurse placements for the regions, and it's for the regions. Now, the distribution priority areas changes have enabled places such as outer suburban areas of metropolitan cities, the Gold Coast, Newcastle, Wollongong, to say that we are short of doctors at the expense of regional centres that in some places don't have a doctor for hundreds of kilometres. And it shouldn't be that when in pain, catch the plane. It shouldn't be that way. And doctors should be encouraged in every way, shape or form to put their shingle up in a country centre. But Labor's taken that away. They've absolutely taken away the incentive and the encouragement by putting in place a measure by which they say that some of these peri-urban centres are somehow should be in the distribution priority areas. And they are not. They should not be. They should not be in that list because it's coming at the expense of hard-working Australians. Hard-working Australians, I might add, who carried this country during COVID, when every city type wanted to pull their doona up over their head and pretend that life wasn't happening and it'll all blow over. The regional people in many of these remote centres were doing the farming, were growing the food, were growing the fibre, were doing the mining that kept this nation's lights on, that kept this nation fed, that kept the clothes on people's backs, and not just for Australians, but for many other nations besides. And then they come in here with these motions, talking themselves up as though they are the ants' pants to health provisions in this country. Well, I'm calling it out. I'm calling it out. And indeed, Labor has not been good for health, particularly for regional health. Regional health, which is crying out for more doctors, crying out for more nurses. And what have we got? We've got a government that doesn't know, doesn't understand, and worst of all, doesn't care.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. And I call a member for Canberra.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And I rise today in strong support of this motion, celebrating the 40th anniversary of Medicare, one of Australia's most transformative government programs. I want to thank the member for Solomon for bringing this to the House today. Medicare enshrined access to healthcare as a right for all Australians, regardless of income or background or where they live. Its legacy is one of compassion, fairness and equity in the provision of healthcare services. And as we celebrate Medicare's 40th birthday this year, it is important to acknowledge the extraordinary individuals and teams that continue to exemplify Medicare's promise through their own dedication and innovation. The Stronger Medicare Awards celebrate primary healthcare professionals across the country who go above and beyond to enhance the health and well-being of Australians. And I'm very proud today to acknowledge 2 recipients of that award from my electorate who were honoured for their outstanding service to healthcare. I want to congratulate Dr Andrew Palfman and Next Practice Canberra for their contributions to caring for our community. Dr Palfman has shown unwavering dedication to the health of his patients, especially in times of crisis. During the COVID-19 pandemic, he took the extraordinary step of setting up a temporary building in his practice's car park. This innovative measure allowed for the safe treatment of infectious patients while simultaneously facilitating critical vaccination clinics for the community. But Dr Palfman's commitment goes far beyond his practice walls and car park. He works with Canberra's Chat to Pat service, which is a bus that brings healthcare to vulnerable and homeless Canberrans, exemplifying Medicare's ethos of inclusive, compassionate care. Next Practice Canberra has similarly demonstrated the gold standard of patient care, and I was really pleased to meet Dr Paresh daughter and Hema daughter at the awards from Next Practice. This practice delivers multidisciplinary, individualised and coordinated care to people with complex and chronic needs. Among its patients are hundreds of individuals in residential aged care, those who are housebound, people with disabilities and patients with palliative care needs. By forming integrated practice units comprising GPs, nurses, nurse practitioners, patient advocates, pharmacists, social workers and a range of other specialists, Next Practice stands as a beacon of holistic, compassionate and team-based care. Their work is a testament to what can be achieved when healthcare professionals collaborate to meet the diverse needs of our communities. I'd also like to acknowledge Gareth Wilden from Capital Chemist, who was a finalist for the Stronger Medicare Awards. As a co-owner of Capital Chemist at the University of Canberra, Gareth has made a significant contribution to breaking down barriers for vulnerable and marginalised communities in Canberra. He collaborates with local organisation Meridian to deliver free vaccinations for people living with or affected by HIV, the LGBTIQ+ community and people at enhanced risk of HIV and STIs. Through the Sex Worker Outreach Program, Gareth also provides vital vaccinations at workplaces, ensuring accessibility and safety for a vulnerable group within our community. This commitment to breaking down barriers is exactly what Medicare represents, healthcare that is accessible and inclusive for everyone. Deputy Speaker, all of us in this House have the deepest respect and gratitude to all healthcare professionals who tirelessly work to keep our communities healthy. Their efforts embody the fundamental belief that it is in your Medicare card, not your credit card, which guarantees quality healthcare. Medicare was a Labor innovation and Labor will always act to improve Medicare and to keep it strong. Whether it be the biggest investment in bulk billing in Medicare's history, the establishment of 87 Medicare urgent care clinics around the nation, the introduction of 60-day dispensing and cheaper medicines, and our commitment to significantly increase funding for our public hospitals. Labor is the party of universal health care, the party of Medicare. We're the party of a healthier Australia. And happy birthday, Medicare.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Bass.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, it's a pleasure to speak to this motion today and take the opportunity to congratulate all of the hard-working and dedicated health professionals in my community, and to particularly highlight a couple of standout services that have recently been awarded for their innovative contributions. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the government's recent Stronger Medicare Awards and share the fantastic work of one of the inaugural winners, City Mission's Mission Health Service in Launceston in my electorate. Local nurse practitioner Jane realised there was a gap in services that could provide free health services to the homeless. Jane joined forces with a registered nurse and lecturer, Michelle, and collaborated with City Mission, a charity organisation, to set up Mission Health Clinic. Mission Health runs on a weekly basis, providing bulk billed healthcare for patients in Launceston experiencing homelessness. The service provides free healthcare for people who may otherwise go without and has been assisted by the volunteer efforts of other local health practitioners. Services include chronic health management, general health assessments, immunisations and sexual health testing, and it is making a measurable and substantial difference to the lives of vulnerable people. Jane said that Medicare has been an integral puzzle piece in the establishment and continued running of Mission Health. Without Medicare, the clinic would rather be non-existent, or it would have been far more difficult to achieve what we have. Without Medicare, much of Mission Health's work would mean that the group would pay private costs for prescription medication. There'd be problems referring to local hospitals, obtaining Medicare funding towards radiology and pathology investigations, and much more. As one of the clinicians of Mission Health, Medicare means that I can receive a fee for service in the work to support homeless people of Launceston. I have elected to return a percentage of this fee to the clinic to buy essential consumables such as wound care products. This cohort of people have difficulty managing appointments, so the drop-in service is ideal for them. Mission Health routinely sees patients in need of immediate health care. Recently, the service helped a young woman with a hormonal device that was 3 years past its effectiveness date. Mission Health was able to remove the old device, replace it with a new one and provide a health check. And there are countless stories like this that Jane and her team encounter each week. This is an innovative and responsive service and a model that could be expanded with greater support, but it will need further support. Although Medicare has helped in delivering this important service, it is not completely responsive to the model, and attention will need to be given to ensure its ongoing sustainability. I have met with Minister Mark Butler to raise the issues facing the centre going forward, and I thank him for his time and interest in the program and hope that a sustainable pathway can be assured for Mission Health. Similarly, I congratulate RACGP General Practice of the Year Award recipient Beaconsfield Family Medical Practice, led by Practice Principal Dr Reddy, as is known to his patients. He only took over the practice in 2023 as a solo GP, but in a little over a year he's grown the clinic to now include 4 full-time GPs and integrated allied health services, and is bulk billing all his patients. But it must be pointed out that this is an exception to the norm in Tasmania, with most practices unable to bulk bill at that level. Primary Health Tasmania, Tasmania's primary health network, provided information and support in areas including accreditation, Australian government funding programs, digital readiness work and other programs. We feel like the PHN has stood as a backbone in this journey of our new medical practice, Dr Reddy said, and we're very thankful for that. What I've seen in this last 12 months is not only did Primary Health Tasmania help me to set up the clinic, but also helps me and my staff to have continuous professional development through the workshops it runs. The community has embraced the GP and his young family with open arms, and I visited the practice recently and I can see how much of a difference the increased services have meant to the community. And I'm excited about the vision and enthusiasm that Dr Reddy has for delivering healthcare in this rural area. But again, more needs to be done. Medicare plays an important part, but it's not the whole story. I am happy to give credit where it's due, but I'd urge the government to redouble its efforts because the job is far from done. There remains huge and urgent gaps in primary healthcare provision in Tasmania, and despite the unfortunate self-congratulatory tone of this motion, many Tasmanians are being left far behind, and the Tasmanian Liberal government has been doing much of the heavy lifting to fill the gaps that the federal government has not. The government has opened new urgent care clinics, but in the meantime, primary health practices have continued to close in regional and rural areas. So your Medicare card may be more important than your credit card, but it is still your postcode that you need to turn your attention to.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Pearce.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I would like to thank the member for Solomon for moving this motion that provides us with the opportunity to celebrate a monumental milestone in the history of our nation, the 40th anniversary of Medicare. This year marks 4 decades since the introduction of a healthcare system that has fundamentally transformed the way Australians access medical services. Since its inception on February 1, 1984, Medicare has stood as a beacon of equality, ensuring that healthcare is not a privilege reserved for the wealthy, but a right shared by all Australians regardless of their income or background. The establishment of Medicare was one of the most transformative moments in Australian history. It was a bold step towards creating a society where every individual could seek medical help without the fear of financial ruin. This revolutionary system was built on the principle that healthcare should be accessible for everyone. Medicare has evolved significantly over these 40 years, from its early days marked by paper claims and lengthy queues to today's streamlined digital processes that allows nearly 500 million services to be processed annually. This evolution reflects not only advancements in technology, but also a commitment to improving accessibility and efficiency in healthcare delivery. To commemorate this historic occasion, the Albanese Labour government has launched the Stronger Medicare Awards. These awards recognise primary healthcare professionals from all corners of our country who have gone above and beyond to improve the lives of Australians. I'd like to take this moment to congratulate all finalists and winners of these prestigious awards. Your dedication and hard work exemplifies the spirit of Medicare and demonstrates how vital primary care is to our communities. We extend our heartfelt gratitude to every general practitioner, nurse, midwife, pharmacist, and allied health professionals working tirelessly in primary care. Your commitment keeps our communities healthy and thriving. You are the backbone of our healthcare system, and it is your unwavering service that ensures all Australians have access to quality medical care. As we celebrate these achievements, let us reaffirm our fundamental belief. It is your Medicare card, not your credit card, that should guarantee access to quality healthcare. This principle is non-negotiable and must remain at the core of our health policy as we move forward. However, we must also acknowledge that this commitment has faced challenges. The current leader of the opposition once attempted to introduce a tax on visits to GPs, froze Medicare rebates, cut $50 billion from hospitals, claimed there were too many free Medicare services, and was even voted by Australia's doctors as the worst health minister in Medicare's history. These actions serve as a stark reminder that only government dedicated to protecting and strengthening Medicare can be trusted with its future. As we look towards the future, it is essential that we continue to build on the legacy of Medicare. The recent launch of initiatives like My Medicare aims to enhance continuity of care and improve access for patients through tailored health packages. These advancements are critical as we strive to ensure that every Australian can receive care at the right time and at the right place. Moreover, as we reflect on what has been achieved over these past 4 decades, we must also consider what lies ahead. The landscape of healthcare is consistently changing, influenced by new technologies, emerging health challenges, and evolving patient needs. It is crucial that we remain adaptable and responsive to these changes, while upholding the principles that have made Medicare a cornerstone of Australian society. In conclusion, as we celebrate 40 years of Medicare, let us honour not only its legacy, but also those who fought tirelessly for its establishment and those who continue to uphold its values today. We are fortunate to live in a country where access to healthcare is recognised as a fundamental right, a right that must be fiercely protected against any attempts to undermine it. Let us move forward together with renewed commitment to strengthen Medicare for future generations so that it remains a source of pride for all Australians. The Albanese Labour government is dedicated to this vital cause and committed to ensuring that every Australian can access quality healthcare without fear or hesitation. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Monash.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, Australia's has a world-class health system, Medicare. The system is the backbone of that system is the dedication of our highly skilled, hard-working healthcare workforce. These healthcare workers are subject to intense conditions that wouldn't be acceptable in any other industry. But day in, day out, they get on with their job and they do it wonderfully. They bore the brunt of the pandemic, and even though overwhelmed with immense pressure and unknown variables, healthcare workers stood as our first line of defence. But 4 years on, healthcare workers are still overwhelmed in large part by unprecedented and unexplained levels of sickness right across the country. Why isn't anyone investigating this phenomenon? The Australian people deserve answers. Today I rise to speak as a matter of grave national importance, one that has until now been met with silence by those who should be taking decisive action. My recent correspondence to the Prime Minister highlights alarming findings in synthetic DNA contamination in Pfizer and Moderna COVID-19 products, detected at levels up to 145 times above the TGA's own stated limits. Let me assure you I did not write those letters lightly. My letters were accompanied by a science summary, co-authored by 52 eminent scientists, including Dr. David Speaker, a Canadian virologist, who authored the report investigating DNA contamination in Australian COVID-19 Pfizer and Moderna vials, Professor Angus Dalgleish, one of the world's leading oncologists, Emeritus Professor Wendy Hoy, Emeritus Professor Robert Clancy, Professor Alexandra Herion-Claude, and Kevin McKernan, former Research Director of the Human Genome Project. These distinguished individuals put their names and reputations on the line, attesting to the overwhelming evidence of synthetic DNA contamination in these vaccines and the risk posed to Australians. The science summary speaks directly to the catastrophic implications of this contamination. Experts have determined that as few as 3 to 10 molecules of the SV body promoter and enhancer sequences contaminating Pfizer's product can potentially trigger cell mutations leading to cancer. Yet Dr. Speaker's analysis of Australia's vials detected billions of these molecules in a single dose. For the TGA to dismiss these concerns outright, without credible testing or scientific analysis, is a failure of duty of the Australian people. Even as the evidence was brought to the attention of the Prime Minister and subsequently passed the Health Minister, we received no scientific denial, nor testing, no thorough investigation, only a letter from the Minister Butler's office referring to the TGA statement, asserting the findings as so-called misinformation. The TGA statement has since been revealed as misleading and wholly unreliable, containing at least 14 false assertions, as documented in a comprehensive analysis co-authored by investigative journalist Rebecca Barnett and leading scientific experts. We are at a crucial juncture this day. The TGA is yet to perform appropriate tests to confirm or deny Dr. Speaker's report findings. The TGA has been using a testing method for DNA contamination that grossly undermeasures the levels of DNA contamination, a method Moderna itself deems inadequate for the purpose in its own patent documents for these drugs. No further evidence has been presented to allay the concerns of scientists or the public. Instead, we see avoidance, misleading statements and a complete lack of accountability from our regulators. I must also draw attention to the extraordinary efforts made by the town of Port Hedland Council, who, after hearing from cancer expert Professor Angus Dalgleish and from their own community experiencing a 7-fold increase in deaths, passed a historic motion calling for the suspension of these products and for the TGA to conduct independent testing. They took a stand, not out of political agenda, but from the ethical duty to protect our community. It was the testimony of Professor Dalgleish observing an alarming increase in aggressive cancers among vaccinated individuals that gave weight to this decision. Professor Dalgleish's observations are echoed by other medical professionals worldwide who are documenting what they term turbo cancers, cancers of an aggressive nature never seen at this scale before. For the health and safety of all Australians, I call upon this House and the Prime Minister to act now, invoke the precautionary principle and suspend these products until independent testing can confirm or dispel these contamination findings. Australia cannot afford the risk of another crisis, one that would eclipse even the devastating thalidomide disaster. We must protect the health of all Australians, and that requires transparency, accountability and action.
Thank the member. The time allotted for this debate has expired. The debate is adjourned and the resumption of the debate will be made in order of the day for the next sitting. I call the clerk.
Private members' business, notice number 4, motion relating to the Victorian road network.
Member for Warren.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. The Albanese Labor government has its priorities all wrong. What we need to see from them today and immediately over the next months and years ahead is investment into our crumbling road network in Victoria. And if they don't do that, it's another example as to why they've got their priorities wrong. Sadly, what we've seen from the Albanese Labor government so far is them cutting maintenance funding to our regional and rural roads in Victoria. As a matter of fact, to roads right across Victoria. And we need to see that reversed, and we need to see that reversed immediately. And if we don't, then the sad reality is the cost of living crisis that people are facing at the moment, and especially what they've been facing over the last 2 years, is only going to get worse, because everywhere I go, people are now saying to me they're starting to see their tyres get punctured, they're starting to see their rims get damaged, and they're starting to see a greater cost to actually driving on our road network. And not only that, sadly, in regional and rural Victoria in particular, we're starting to see the road accidents and road deaths begin to increase again. And that is why the Albanese Labor government has to change its priorities and change them right here and now. Now, if you take the Princes Highway in my electorate, what have we seen the Albanese Labor government do since they came into power? Not say to the Victorian State Government, we'll provide 80% of the funding for the road maintenance if you'll provide 20%. They've said, we will only provide 50%. So when the Allan Labor government has cut maintenance funding to Victorian roads by 95%, then that means that the Albanese Labor government have dramatically cut their road funding to Victoria as well. And this is simply not good enough. And I can tell you, the feedback I get from my electorate on a daily basis, and I know other members get it exactly the same, is that we need immediately the federal government to take action and to start investing in our local road network again. And what they have to make sure they don't do is they cannot spend time, effort and money wasting it on business cases. They need to make sure they deliver that money right here and now. Now, Deputy Speaker, this isn't against investing in rail. As my constituents know, I advocated strongly to get an upgrade to the rail link between Melbourne and Warrnambool, and we got serious Commonwealth investment into that rail network. So it's not about anything against rail. What this is about is the dire emergency facing Victoria's road network. The dire emergency facing Victoria's road network. And it's not just me or the member for Casey who's complaining about this. Even the government's own members of parliament are doing that. If you go and have a look at the member for Corangamite social media, there is the member for Corangamite complaining about the state of the roads in Corangamite. So this is an issue across the board, Everyone in Victoria knows that we're not getting the investment that we need in our roads. Everyone knows that the Albanese Labor government has their priorities wrong in cutting maintenance funding. Everyone knows that the Allan Labor government have got their priorities wrong in cutting funding to Victorian road network. And that is why this motion is calling on Anthony Albanese to immediately invest money into improving our road network, improving maintenance, improving building of our road network in Victoria, because if he doesn't do this, then sadly, the phone call that I received a couple of weeks ago is likely to be all too more common. I had a lady ring me and say that she lost her brother years ago in a road accident, and given the state of the road, she's worried that it's going to continue to happen again.
To assist the chamber, would the member for One in Mind formally moving his motion?
And I would like to formally move my motion, Deputy Speaker.
Is the motion seconded?
I second the motion to reserve my right to speak.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Bendigo.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, I reckon that the member for Wannon has probably been asleep for the last 2 years, or at least on budget night, and may have missed this government's increase in the budget for Roads to Recovery. It is this government which has doubled the funding for Roads to Recovery to $1 billion annually, which we will reach. In my own electorate, that is an increase of to up to $20 million for the City of Greater Bendigo alone. That's an increase of $8.5 million to do exactly what the member for Wannon is ranting about. Give money to local government to improve our local road network. That is what this government is doing. That is also to the history of this Prime Minister, and also when he was the Minister for Infrastructure and the Shadow Minister for Infrastructure. This program, Roads to Recovery, is something that he has been a champion for a long time. When we were in opposition, it was his idea that he put to the then government to take the fuel excise that they had been collecting and to put it, when they cut the, when they decided to index fuel excise, he said, put that extra money into the Roads to Recovery budget. That is what he has done. This government, under Anthony Albanese, has a track record of investing in our local roads because we listen to community, we work with local government and we care. That is why in our budget we've committed to change. But it is not just the Roads to Recovery budget where we have increased funding. We've also increased funding to the Black Spots program, another program that is delivering in Victoria and in every state. That is where local government nominate to state government which roads are in need of repair. And I know because I chair the Black Spot group in Victoria that 25% of the funding is allocated to roads of black spot at risk, where locals are concerned that there could be a collision, and 75% is towards projects where there has been incidences already. Funding has gone to my electorate, funding has gone to the member for Hawke, who I know will speak on this motion, in relation to this issue. So we take road safety and road repair very seriously, and under this government we are acting. From $110 million to $150 million per year. That is the extra money that this government is putting in. We're also putting more money into safer local roads and infrastructure program. Again, money which is going to regional electorates. I stood with the local member for Bendigo West, who's allocated money from the federal government to the state government, joint funding to improve roads in our electorate. Another program that came from this government. What the opposition is suggesting in this motion is if they're in government, they could not do both. In this motion, they have made it clear that it is either urban rail through the suburban rail loop or country roads. It's a devastating admission by the opposition that they are saying that they cannot do both. In government, we are delivering both. We have put $2.2 billion of funding into the suburban rail loop. We are saying to those outer metro areas of Melbourne, you should have an urban rail option. And that is why we are partnering with the Vic State Government to see that project delivered. And we are also delivering, as I've said, extra funding to fix our regional roads in Victoria, and we are delivering. It is the Roads to Recovery program, it is the Black Spot program, it is the new Safer Local Roads and Infrastructure program. They're just three of the many projects. And I note the interjections from the member for Wannon, who doesn't like being called out on the political rhetoric that we are seeing from those opposite, the wedge politics that they're trying to drive, which is either money for infrastructure in outer Melbourne or money for regions. In government, because we have members from the regions and the outer urban areas, we are doing both. We are working with local and state government to deliver both. One of the other challenges that we have had in our area, and I'm proud to say all three levels of government are working together, is rebuilding after recent flood events in 2022 and earlier this year. Another fund of how we are delivering. Under Labor, under the Albanese and the Allen government, we are working together to deliver the road and rail infrastructure that the state of Victoria needs.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Casey.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, talking about roads in Victoria, it's very similar to talking about the economy. The Albanese government keep telling us how we've never had it better, the economy is flying, except every Australian is worse today than they were 2.5 years ago. Very similar to roads in Victoria. We just heard from the member for Bendigo about how great the roads are in Victoria, all the money that's going in, never had it better when it comes to roads. Well, that's news to my community because I was at the Lilydale show this weekend talking to locals despite the heat and the rain and the storms that came on a Saturday and a Sunday as we get in Melbourne. And roads was the second biggest issue we heard about behind cost of living. And my community know all about the Albanese Labor government when it comes to road funding and cuts, because we had $100 million cut from our community from the Roads for Communities sealing program. That was a program that was going to seal 150 kilometres of road all across my community over 10 years. It was committed to by the Coalition in 2019. It had bipartisan support. The then Shadow Minister for Infrastructure, Anthony Albanese, committed to it. Anthony Albanese then, as the Shadow Minister, committed to the program. The program was being delivered on time and on budget. And the member from Hawke can continue to interject because I know his community is concerned about roads as well. And my community knows that that money was committed to by the then Labor opposition over 10 years. That project was being delivered on time and on budget. Senate estimates, the department confirmed that it was improving safety in the community, and it was pulled by the Albanese Labor government. So my community knows all about the promises when it comes to roads and the broken promises from this government. But we also understand firsthand why we need to continue to invest in roads. Melbourne Highway between Coldstream and Yea, through the RACV My Country Road Survey, was voted, unfortunately, as the most dangerous road in Victoria. As you go up that road, there's a significant challenge and intersection, a big sweeping bend at the corner of the highway and St Hubert's. Just recently I was driving the road and essentially had the old wobbles from the corrugation on a bitumen road. It was a moment where I was lucky to keep myself safe on that road. It's a dangerous road as you sweep. It's an 80-kilometre road. So the solution from the government is to put up signs slowing the speed to 40 kilometres. And that's the solution we get, not to actually fix the problem, but to put a sign up warning Victorians, warning members and community members in Casey to slow down to 40 kilometres on a road that should be sealed. I've been working with Cindy McLeish, the member for Eildon, the state member, to get that funding upgraded because it's a significant local road. It's a significant thoroughfare as people use that road for holidays with caravans. Lots of trucks go on that road, and the best we can get is a sign telling us to slow down from 80 to 40. We also have Warburton Highway between Seville and Woorolloc that was in the top of that list of dangerous roads. As you drive along those roads, you see the potholes that are continuing to grow bigger and bigger. If we're lucky, we get a patch job and then it just happens again as soon as it rains. And it's going to get worse. As we know, the road maintenance budget was slashed by 95% in Victoria. So at a time when roads are worse than ever, the funding is being slashed, which means the problem is going to continue to exacerbate. Every week we get emails and calls in my office from residents that have been driving along, particularly at night, that hit a pothole, that have rim damage, that aren't able to be delivered. They have no faith in the federal government that funding will actually come because they know it has been cut before. They have no faith in the Victorian Labor government that it will be delivered. We know Killara Road, as an example, is another project that shows that the Victorian Labor government is unable to deliver projects. They've had that money to deliver that upgrade since 2019, and we get to the end of 2024 and we're still waiting for that project to start. Because that is the reality for the Victorian people, for the community in Casey. We commit funding, Labor will do two things. They'll cut it or they'll fail to deliver on the project. Now, they've said, the department, that the works will start in early 2025, so I'll await, Deputy Speaker, with interest whether the Victorian State Government actually get on with it and deliver some safer roads for my community.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Corangamite.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'd like to thank my neighbour, the member for Wannon, for moving this timely and important motion about the state of roads, particularly in regional Victoria. Can I say just how disappointing it is for me personally that so much of my electorate now falls within the electorate of Wannon, from Apollo Bay to Colac, from Forest to Anglesea. These are some of the most incredible places across the nation, and the member for Wannon is privileged to have these communities in his electorate. And I know that these communities and the local roads that maintain the roads across southwest Victoria have suffered a decade of neglect under the former Liberal government. Deputy Speaker, after a decade of Liberal neglect, local councils have now received record funding in the past 2 years under Labor. We're delivering record increases to local council road infrastructure funding. We are progressively doubling roads to recovery funding to $1 billion per year, and we're increasing the Black Spot program by $50 million per year to $150 million. This means that every single local council in Australia will receive more funding for local road infrastructure and maintenance under Labor. More money than ever before for local councils to spend on fixing potholes, improving our roads and making our thoroughfares safer to drive on, particularly in regional and rural areas. This is groundbreaking, and it stands in stark contrast to the Liberals' inaction. The federal government will say, the former federal coalition will say they funded roads when in government, but the reality is it was clearly insufficient, and it's taken the Albanese Labor government to bite the bullet and address the shortfall. For example, Deputy Speaker, the Liberals should explain to my communities on the Bellarine in Victoria why they did not provide enough funding to get the Grub Road upgrade in Ocean Grove off the ground. Now, the former coalition government said they would upgrade it, but as per usual, it was a photo op first and community second. The former government underfunded the Grub Road upgrade from the outset, so the project has languished until the Albanese Labor government stepped in and contributed $2.2 million of additional funding. And as of October, workers are now on the ground getting the job done. So, Deputy Speaker, it's absolutely clear the Albanese government is investing in the Bellarine, Geelong, the Surf Coast and Golden Plains. We've also rolled out about $2 million in black spot funding to improve road safety within the city of Greater Geelong in the last year alone. On the point of Armstrong Creek, I'm advocating strongly, and it is up to the city of Greater Geelong because it is local roads. They can apply for funding. I'm wanting them to do more for black spot funding and to access some of the funding which the federal government has put forward. So I'm pushing them to do that in a rapidly growing area that does need attention. Now, we've included funding to upgrade the roundabout at Marshalltown Road and Bailey Street in Grovedale. The roundabout was notoriously dangerous, with many accidents just outside the busy Grovedale Primary School. And now locals have a new roundabout, with Wombat crossings, a new road surface and street lighting. We've also rolled out more than $1.3 million for road projects on the Surf Coast. This has delivered much-needed upgrades for the Esplanade, one of Torquay's busiest thoroughfares along the beachfront. We're also about to upgrade the Surf Coast Highway Reserve Road intersection, another much-needed project that the coalition underfunded. Importantly, we're about to kick off early next year on Stage 2 of the Barwon Heads Road upgrade. Now, this is in the heart of Armstrong Creek and Charlemont and Mount Dunedin, and it's taken a Liberal government, a Labor government working with the state to make this happen. This is a joint funding partnership, and it is a $250 million project to duplicate this busy arterial road. The upgrade will make a massive difference to local workers, families and business owners travelling to Geelong and the coast, particularly during the busy summer months. And on Saturday, Deputy Speaker, we officially opened the Warn Ponds rail duplication, with works now complete. And this is almost a $1 billion project that will mean more trains on the line and less cars on the road.
The question is
it is funded by the Albanese government and the state government. So, Deputy Speaker, in closing, after a decade of former coalition government promising the world and delivering little, the Albanese government is doing the work needed.
That the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Mallee.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I want to commend my good colleague, the member for Wannon, for this very timely motion about how horrible the roads are. And that this government has done little, and in fact in my electorate I would say nothing, to improve the safety of those who drive in the electorate of Mallee. Hardly a day goes by in my electorate in northwest Victoria where constituents don't complain about the state of the roads. Pick a highway. Pick any road. Calder Highway, Sunraysia Highway, Sea Lake Robinvale Road, Henty Highway, Murray Valley Highway, Western Highway, they are all awful. Some ask if they can send the bill to the Victorian government for the damage to their vehicle, as the motion states, from driving at high speed through unexpected potholes on major roads. We're not talking back roads here, we're talking major highways. The roads in Mallee are among some of the most dangerous in Victoria. I regularly drive the length and breadth of my electorate and see firsthand the state of roads that constituents are forced to use every day. The state of the roads beggars belief. There are sections of road in Mallee where the potholes are huge and the bitumen is hanging on for dear life. I have even had a constituent tell me he toots his horn when approaching potholes to ensure there's not a mob of sheep in there. The safety of Mallee drivers is being compromised by the Victorian State Government's poor management of regional road repairs. According to the departmental documents, there has been a 95% reduction in essential road maintenance between 2022-23 and 23-24, from 9 million square kilometres to 422,000 square kilometres. I mean, seriously. Motorists in regional Victoria have been left to navigate a network of pothole-plagued roads that are not fit for use. RACV's 2024 My Country Road Survey shows that potholes and poor road condition are the biggest safety issues on regional roads across the state, with improving road surfaces a top priority. This issue is of immense concern to regional Victorians like those who live in Mallee, as illustrated by the 75% increase in responses to this year's survey alone, and the finding that while in 2021 dangerous driver behaviour was the top issue, now it's poor road conditions, which has rated as more than twice as important. The findings of the Victorian State Government survey reinforce this fact, finding that 91% of roads were in poor or very poor condition. The Auditor-General investigated the $2.2 billion the Albanese government had no hesitation giving the Andrews-Allen Victorian Labor government's pet suburban rail loop project, which is blown out from an initial $50 billion to, if you don't mind, $216 billion at last count. The Auditor-General said in September, as at June 2024, the SRL, Suburban Rail Link East, had yet to go through the formal project approval process, and the department is awaiting a project proposal report from the Victorian Government. This process must occur before funding can be expended. The Victorian Government also quietly shut down Regional Roads Victoria earlier this year. Victorian Labor has launched the agency in 2018 with the promise it would ensure, and I quote, regional communities have the safe and reliable roads they deserve. So what do? You just remove the agency, so nobody knows how bad the roads are. The Albanese government is 100% responsible, hand in glove with the Victorian government, for the shabby condition and the unsafe conditions of the roads in my electorate, and they need to be held to account, and that is what this side of the House will do.
The question is that motion be agreed to. I call the member for McEwen.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. The audacity of those opposite to walk into the chambers and talk about the lack of road funding in Victoria is honestly astounding. Their own legacy is a stain on infrastructure development right across Victoria, especially with the investment in roads. When that lot was in government, Victoria drew the short straw. A government that the member for Wannon was not only a member of, but he sat in cabinet making those decisions to cut the road funding. Victorians receive, buckle up, champ, because it's going to keep going. 7% of infrastructure funding in your last term of government was all you gave Victoria. You promised you, as in the government, promised $50 million for the Hume Highway upgrade, and where did that go? It didn't even last. It didn't last the press release. You never funded it. In fact, I will happily stand there, bring the letter signed by Alan Tudge that said he is taking away the funding for the Hume Highway. And I look forward to the member for Wannon standing up and having to apologise to the House because he's misled once again. You couldn't fund jack all. You couldn't deliver a pizza. You could deliver a press release, but that was about it. You cut black spot funding in your last government. You cut infrastructure to regional and growing communities across Victoria. Whether it was their mistruths in the election campaigns about Hume Highway or the Wallen ramps, everything was cut. Nothing was done. And they didn't even want to deliver on Yen Yen Road. They left people in McEwen, whether in Mernda, Wallen, Whittlesea, Kilmore or Gisborne, with deteriorating roads and dangerous driving conditions. The only service they ever gave was lip service because the opposition the now opposition, didn't spend a single penny on road maintenance. Where was the member for Wannon's outrage when his government cut and froze road funding? He didn't care about road safety in Victoria. This is just a political stunt to fill in time to hide the fact that for 9 years they did absolutely nothing. He stands here with his manufactured outrage despite the Albanese Labor government increasing funding to $460 million with a commitment for funding on black spots to increase every year. Only a Labor government can be trusted to protect the upgraded Victorian roads and give the people of McEwen a fair go. With the Albanese Labor government making $4.4 billion available under Federal Roads to Recovery program over the next 5 years. Under this program, Victoria will receive $895 million over 5 years. Now, before you get your calculator out, I'll save you time. It's $368 million more that Victorians will receive under us than they would have received had we unfortunately kept Morrison as Prime Minister. But as we know, when it comes to funding, as our veterans found out, those opposite only fund things that they think is a political advantage, which is why they never funded the Calder, why they never funded the Hume and why they never funded Watson Street. The Albanese Labor government has shown its commitment by going on with the projects that we need in our community, whether it is the completion of Bridge and Road in Mernda, finished well ahead of time because government's working together getting things done. The commitment made in this year's budget for an extra $437 million to the suburban road upgrade package because when they were in government, they did a western one, they did an eastern one, but then they put the north and the south together and only funded half of that. We've come and fixed it. Of course, the silence is an acknowledgement that it was badly handled by the former government. We also have the Camerons Lane interchange at Beveridge, with the Albanese Labor government committing $900 million to get this done because it's 20,000 jobs, it's fixing up the inland rail that they absolutely destroyed, and it's great having a Prime Minister and a Minister for Infrastructure to be down talking about these projects and getting them done. In recent weeks, we were joined at Wallen to discuss the Watson Street interchange, a project to ensure faster, safer access to the Hume Highway. Where was the $50 million promised by the former government? Well, we know the former Deputy Prime Minister, Michael McCormick, the member for Riverina, wanted to fund it, but then he got rolled by his own backlot and the money disappeared. So much so that Minister Tudge took the money out the car park scheme and sent a press release saying, oh, we're going to fund it. But guess what? When we got there, the cupboard was bare and Tian and Co had none. No money anywhere for road projects in our area. So I say to the member for Wannon, our state in Victoria, a state that you should be sticking up for. Remember what happened to your mate Joshy, who attacked Victoria? You should stick up for Victoria and try and get things done. You sat there in Cabinet eating your triangle sandwiches, having your cups of tea, and did not support Victorians. You should be ashamed.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Latrobe.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I congratulate the member for Wannon for putting this motion up? And it's so sad that in Victoria, when it comes to basic road maintenance can't get completed and done on time, and there's potholes everywhere. And it all just goes back to the way the Albanese Labor government is mismanaging so many things, but in particular road funding projects. Now, I can give the perfect examples, and this is where we have the Dandenong Ranges, which covers Casey and also Latrobe, and places like Cockatoo, Gembrook and Emerald. They are in when it comes to bushfires, in a real dangerous situation, because there's not many ways to get out of Emerald and Cockatoo and Gembrook. The main way is the Wellington Road. So back in 2006, when I was first elected, we actually put funding, so make it 2008, we put funding into that road for overtaking lanes. And sadly, and I must admit, the Yarra Ranges Council, when it came to deciding where these overtaking lanes divot, and the reason these were so important was just because if there's a bushfire, people needed space to get out of the hills. So in actual fact, and I actually lost my seat back in 2010. The very last thing I did, though, is wrote to the then Transport Minister, Anthony Albanese, and pleaded with him, do not divert the funding. As soon as we had the Labor government, the funding was diverted. So anyway, so go back or forward into the future. Again, in 2018, we recommitted the funding to that project, and a duplication, $110 million. What happens again? Labor get into power and they scrap that funding and divert it. That is such a dangerous road, Wellington Road. There's been so many serious actions there, a number of fatalities, and the funding's been diverted. And also when it came to another project, we had the sealing of the Dandenong Ranges. $300 million was committed for Yarra Ranges Council and also Cardinia Council. And again, when it comes to bushfires, if people need to get off and it's smoky and dangerous, people who live in areas maybe in the city wouldn't realise that the curbs on the side that may be half a metre deep, and if a car goes into that, well, obviously they're not going to get it out and it's going to jam up the traffic. Well, again, Labor, Albanese government, cancelled all those projects. So Cardinia Council and Yarra Ranges councils are absolutely furious. Now, to tell you about the waste of funding, the Clyde Road upgrade, which is going on at the moment, we committed again under Liberal government 5 years ago, an upgrade there. And when we got Casey Council, the road engineers, to give us a costing, it was $70 million. And then the state Labor government said, take it or leave it, $250 million. Now, obviously they have to look after their mates in the CFMEU. But can I just say, Madam Deputy Speaker, we're talking about a 900-metre section of road from the train line going over to the Monash Freeway. That's now blown out to $250 million. So for every 1 metre, it's $250,000 just to duplicate it. Admittedly, there's extra cost when it comes to the on-off ramps and also going over the Monash Freeway. But the price is so much higher than what the engineers at Casey actually submitted. Then we've got the same when it comes to Pakenham Roads upgrades. Again, former Liberal government, we got the funding, Racecourse McGregor Road. This was a project in the vicinity of $100 million. Now that's blown up to $400 million. And it was again, take it or leave it. Now, if people want to know how bad the roads are in Victoria and why, it's because there's been a 90% reduction of road funding repairs by the Allan Labor government. And sadly, when it comes to the Albanese Labor government, is the diverting good road projects and not investing in local councils to actually keep the maintenance of roads, whether it be in electorates like mine or the member for Wannon. And that's why the member for Wannon, like myself, and also members for Casey, those outer suburban electorates, and then also member for Flinders, that road funding is so important, and the Albanese Labor government has completely failed.
The question is the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Hawke.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The Liberal Party never miss an opportunity to play politics with an important issue. They have a long and storied history of cuts to all essential services. Australians know it, it's their brand. They do the cuts every time they come in, they cut everything. And road funding is no exception to this. They have cut road funding in regional and outer suburban areas over and over again. Roads are vital to the daily lives of Australians. They connect families, they support businesses and ensure that we can all travel safely to work and get home again. In my electorate of Hawke, one of the fastest growing regions in the country, this is particularly true. Communities in...
A division has been called for in the House. The proceedings are suspended to enable honourable members to attend the division.